Chapter 381. Crisis Over. Wu Di turned his head to look at her. Otherwise, why do you think Xiaoxi directly opened fire and blasted those two people without saying a word just now? Lin Yu blinked, speaking before Wu Di could say anything. Big brother Wu Di, can Xiaoxi already understand your gaze? Right. Do we not need to lift a finger against those monsters tonight either? Wouldn't it be better to just let Xiaoxi blast them all away directly? As she spoke, she raised her head and saw that Wu Di was staring right at her. Lin Yu's face heated up, and she shrank back a little. Big brother Wu Di, why are you looking at me like that? Pfft. Shu Kexin couldn't help laughing out loud from the side, leaning over and making faces at Lin Yu. Xiao Yui, save that expression of yours for the boss when you're alone. There are so many people here. How embarrassing. Lin Yu jerked her head up and saw that Lin Shi was staring right at her, and even Xiaoya was tilting her small face up, looking over with eyes full of curiosity. Her cheeks burned instantly red, and she buried her face into Wu Di's arm, not daring to speak again. Later, no matter what kind of state outside is crashed into, do not make a move proactively. Wu Di suddenly spoke. A single sentence pulled everyone's attention over. Shu Kexin raised an eyebrow. Boss, if we ignore those monsters outside and they smash the shelter to pieces, won't we be doomed with not even a place to hide? Figure out the situation tonight. Wu Di's tone was calm, his gaze falling in the direction of the stone door without saying another word. No one retorted. Inside the shelter it quieted down with only the continuous sound of impacts from outside passing in one after another, dull and rhythmic. Wu Di's fingertips swiped across the communication channel, and messages were refreshing rapidly. Is that it? This so-called dark tide isn't that scary either. Hiding inside the shelter means nothing happens. Don't celebrate too early. It's only the second night. Would the system give you a safe house for free? Do you think this is coming for a vacation? With so many people guarding a shelter, can it really not be held? Has anyone opened the door to look? What on earth is outside? I've been curious for a day. Speaking of which, why are those two vehicle modification books on the trading channel still listed? Haven't they been sold yet? How do you guys think those 2,000 plus people who died actually died? That's a tank modification book. Can ordinary resources catch their eye? Who can afford to trade for it? Fuck. Whoever posted that vehicle modification book, don't let me know who you are. I offered 3,000 units of gasoline and so many materials, and you fucking wouldn't reply to my message. Seriously, has anyone tried staying inside a vehicle at night? The system says you can't stay inside a vehicle at night. What exactly are the consequences? I've tried it, no problem at all. Right now I'm lying inside my own compartment. There are still such morons laughing my head off. Do you even know who that person is barking here? Stop barking, and look at the fact that just the built-in main guns alone are 2 pieces of golden quality. Without 3 or 4 golden quality items, could anyone trade for it? There are such lucky dogs everywhere. I've scraped by until now and only have 2 golden items. I'm so fucking envious. Wu Di scanned a circle and closed the panel. There was simply no useful information. The impact sounds outside rang out rhythmically. Time passed bit by bit. Nearing the early hours, the impact sounds outside stopped without warning. The instantaneous dead silence was instead more unsettling than the continuous noise. Lin Yu instinctively raised her head. Except for Shu Kexin and Xiaoya, who were already fast asleep, all the remaining people looked toward Wu Di. Wu Di slowly shook his head. The few withdrew their gazes, no one spoke, and they continued waiting. The dead silence continued until 2:08 a.m. Dong, a completely different muffled sound suddenly burst open, dozens of times heavier than the previous impact sounds, like a giant hammer fiercely smashing against the stone door, causing the entire shelter to sway slightly along with it. The next second, everyone's system panels popped up simultaneously. Warning, the shelter protective barrier is rapidly decaying and will be completely destroyed in 10 minutes. At the other corner, Lao Zhou and the other three instantly bounced up from the ground, all staring in the direction of the stone door with pale faces. "What's the situation?" Lao Pao's voice tightened. "What is that thing outside? Is the shelter going to shatter? What are you panicking for?" Lao Zhou let out a low shout, though his brows were also knitted into a knot. "Didn't those people over there say they would handle it? Let's see how the commotion goes first." "Handle my ass, this commotion is more than 10 times bigger than just now." Ah Hong clenched her short knife, her knuckles turning white. "If the stone door really breaks, we won't even have a place to hide." Wenbin pushed his glasses, his voice sinking. "The system prompts destruction in 10 minutes, which means the barrier can still hold on for a while. It all depends on whether those people over there make a move." "Make a move? Why on earth would they risk their lives to save us?" Lao Pao spat. "At worst, we all die together, wandering around in the apocalypse for so long. I've earned enough." "Stop talking bullshit." Lao Zhou glared at him, his gaze fixed dead on the direction of the corner. "Wait a bit longer." As soon as his voice fell, 3 figures were seen walking out from the gap between the 2 RVs. Walking at the very front was the aloof girl seen during the day, followed by 2 unfamiliar faces, one tied with a high ponytail and sharp eyes, the other with neat short hair and steady steps. The 3 women walked shoulder to shoulder to the side of the stone door without a hint of hesitation in their steps. "Holy crap!" Lao Pao lowered his voice. "Wenbin, what you said was really accurate. 2 more popped out. How come one is better looking than the other?" Ah Hong instinctively muttered a sentence, then quickly came back to her senses. "What are they trying to do? They wouldn't want to rush out, right? Are they crazy? The system already said you can't stay in the wild at night." Wenbin frowned. "No, wait. Could they be planning to open the stone door?" As soon as those words were finished, that aloof girl was seen reaching out and pressing her hand against the stone door. The heavy stone door slowly slid open outward. The moment the gap of the stone door widened, all 4 of them clearly saw the scene outside, collectively drawing in a breath of cold air. Outside the door was a group of humanoid creatures nearly 2 meters tall with large builds. Their entire bodies were dark black, holding axe-like weapons in their hands, densely crowding outside the door. The leading one was exceptionally tall, its figure almost as high as the stone door, and it was raising an axe to smash against the stone door stroke by stroke. Fucking hell, they actually dared open the door. Lao Pao's voice changed tune. "Quick, get ready. If anything rushes in, we'll have to go up too." No one answered. The next second, a violent roaring sound suddenly exploded, making people's eardrums ache with pain. The 4 of them instinctively looked in the direction of the sound and instantly froze in place. Atop the RV at the corner, 2 gun barrels were spitting tongues of fire. The dense gunfire lasted for less than 3 minutes. When everything returned to silence, the outside of the door was empty and desolate, with nothing left. The 3 women didn't stay long. After closing the stone door, they turned around and walked back to the RV corner, their figures quickly disappearing into the shadows. Inside the shelter, it was quiet for a long time. Lao Pao finally spoke dryly. "Holy crap, this firepower is too fierce, right? Are bullets free?" Just like that for 3 minutes, at least a few thousand rounds were fired. "The quality of this vehicle-mounted weapon is definitely not low. Maybe they're all golden." Ah Hong swallowed a mouthful of saliva. "It's too overpowered. How is this a configuration ordinary players can have?" "Don't you guys feel something is wrong?" Wenbin suddenly spoke, his face turning pale. Chapter 382. Massive Changes in the Domain Space. Wenbin's voice drifted a bit. "System prompt. Players cannot enter the interior of a vehicle at night." "Then you guys tell me, who was operating these 2 cannons?" "Lao Zhou?" Lao Pao and Ah Hong looked at each other in dismay. A thought popped up in their minds simultaneously, crawling up their spines and bringing a chill with it. That's right. They couldn't enter vehicles at night. Then who was firing the cannons on the vehicle? The four of them stiffened in place, their spines sending out waves of coldness. Players cannot enter vehicles at night. This is a rule clearly written by the system. Lao Pao swallowed his saliva, his voice dry. Could the cannons on the vehicle possibly be firing by themselves? And that woman who got hit by the fireball in the afternoon. Ah Hong suddenly spoke up. At that time, the fireball hit her back squarely. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been lying down long ago, but she got up as if nothing had happened. Didn't you guys feel that something was wrong? Her physique is just high, Lao Zhou said in a deep voice. Once attributes are stacked to a certain level, there's definitely no problem. I heard that some people's physique has reached 50 points, and even a knife hacking at them can't break their skin. Wenbin's brows knitted even tighter. It's not just physique. Didn't you guys notice? Their actions of opening the door, positioning themselves, and firing were way too practiced, without even a pause. You mean? Last night, they definitely fought like this too, Wenbin said with a definitive tone. Daring to open the door and take the dark tide head-on the first night. They are either crazy or have absolute confidence in their own strength. Lao Zhou slowly nodded, his gaze once again casting toward the shadow at the corner of the RV. Actually, Wenbin still had a doubt in his heart that he hadn't voiced out. In their few contacts, the ones who stepped forward were all women. However, whether it was the rhythm of making decisions or the subtle aura of the team, the core was obviously that man who had never shown his face. The women were already outrageously strong, so what level should that man hiding behind the scenes be? Wenbin suddenly thought of something, his expression changing slightly. You guys say, could that mysterious person ranked first on the vehicle leaderboard be them? The air fell silent for a few seconds. No way. Lao Zhou shook his head first. How could there be such a coincidence? Although he said that, no one knew what the others were thinking in their hearts. There were no more incidents during the second half of the night. Just as the time jumped to 6 o'clock sharp, the heavy truck in the corner started its engine with a boom. Without the slightest hesitation, the front of the truck turned and charged straight toward the stone gate. Sensing the vehicle approaching, the stone gate slowly opened. The heavy truck stepped on the gas and rushed out, disappearing without looking back. Immediately after, the RV equipped with vehicle-mounted weapons belonging to the 7-person team at the corner also drove out of the shelter. In the original spot, only another RV remained, parked at the corner without the slightest movement. Lao Zhou and the other three looked at each other in dismay. What's the situation? Aren't these two from the same team? Lao Pao was dumbfounded. Impossible. Ah Hong immediately shook her head. Coming and going together last night and cooperating with such tacit understanding, how could they not be in the same team? Then what does it mean to leave a car here? Lao Pao scratched his head. Could it be that someone hasn't left yet, preparing to leave later? Several people looked at Wenbin simultaneously. Wenbin stared at that empty RV, his eyes glazing over, and the shock on his face couldn't be hidden at all. Say something, Wenbin. Are you dumbfounded? Lao Zhou pushed him. Wenbin suddenly snapped back to his senses, his voice a bit drifting. All 7 of them are in that car that just drove away. What? Lao Pao failed to suppress his voice for a moment. 7 people? 1 car? Are they crazy? If the team size exceeds the limit, the disaster difficulty will double. No wonder the firepower is so fierce. Lao Zhou's expression was solemn. I heard that ruthless people in the top 100 of the leaderboard only dare to form teams of 3 at most. Exceeding 3 people, the crisis will jump up a tier. At the beginning, I don't know how many large teams died just like that. Then why are they leaving this RV behind? Don't they want it? Ah Hong raised her chin, pointing at the woman shrinking in the corner. Could it be left for her? The few of them were stunned. A completely intact RV was thrown away just like that, all for a stranger they rescued. Crazy, truly crazy. Lao Pao muttered to himself. To them, a car of this level is probably no different from trash. Inside the RV domain space, in front of the world tree, the trunk, over 6 meters tall, stood upright and stretched out. Wu Di reached out his palm and pressed it against the trunk. "I brought you good stuff this time," he muttered to himself in a low voice. "Let's see what kind of shape you can be fed into." The leaves at the treetops swayed gently. Clearly there was no wind, yet it seemed to be responding to him. "Can you really hear me? I wonder if you'll be able to speak in the future." There was no second response, only the rustling sound of leaves rubbing against each other. Wu Di didn't mind either. He took out the Origin World crystal core from his personal space, flicked his finger, and the crystal core fell into the soil at the roots of the tree. The soil turned over instantly, and fine roots broke through the ground, wrapping around the crystal core. Within a few breaths, the entire Origin World crystal core was completely enveloped by the tree roots and slowly dragged underground. The next second, the entire world tree lit up with a faint glowing white halo, spreading all the way from the roots to the treetops. Wu Di crossed his arms and waited for a long time. The halo gradually receded, and the trunk was still that same trunk, with no change in height, and not even a single new leaf sprouted out. "No way?" He frowned. Even purple quality things give changes when eaten. Law quality things just glow when eaten. As soon as his voice fell, the ground under his feet trembled violently. At first it was just a slight tremor, then it became more and more intense, and the entire domain space began to roar. Wu Di steadied his figure, looked up at the world tree in front of him, and his pupils shrank slightly. The trunk grew thicker and taller at a speed visible to the naked eye. The tree body, which was originally more than 6 meters tall, climbed step by step, 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. Wu Di looked up, watching. The trunk of the world tree at this moment was shockingly thick, with a DBH of a full 2 meters and more, requiring 3 or 4 people to embrace it together. The canopy spread out like a giant green umbrella, blocking out the sky and sun. A rough estimate made it close to 50 meters tall. Only then did he snap back to his senses and turn to look around. The space that was originally 100 meters long and wide and completely flat had now expanded several times, boundless at a glance, with a rough estimate of at least a 5-fold increase. Under his feet was no longer a flat grassland. The terrain had undulations, with a few gentle slopes bulging in the distance. Closer to the edge, a patch of low dark green jungle had actually risen from the ground. The scent of vegetation in the air grew stronger. Wu Di lowered his head and looked at the other side. The pond dug by Lin Shi and the others with their own hands, and the cultivated vegetable plots, had long been smoothed out in the previous tremor, leaving not even a trace. The corners of his mouth twitched as he looked up and glared at the giant tree. "You grew to your heart's content, but the vegetable plots and ponds that they worked so hard to make were all shaken away by you. It's a good thing you're a tree, otherwise I'd definitely give you a beating." His gaze swept not far away, where the 2-bedroom, 1-living-room residential module was still standing intact in its original place. Not bad, the most important thing wasn't overturned. At this moment, a childish and crisp female voice rang out in the depths of his mind without any warning, sounding soft and waxy. "Daddy?" Wu Di stiffened all over, suddenly raising his head to look at the giant tree. "Is it you?" Chapter 383, Direction of Improvement. The branches and leaves swayed as if a breeze was blowing. Wu Di stood for half a minute and did not hear a second sound again. He withdrew his gaze, swept over the brand-new domain space, and had a bit of a headache. He had never managed the pond and vegetable patch, but they were dug out and tidied up bit by Lin Shi and the others. Every one of them spent a lot of time on it every day. Now it was great. A tree grew wildly and directly leveled it. Forget it. Wu Di shook his head. At worst, they would just start over again. Looking up at the 50-meter-tall giant tree, he said in a low voice, "If you do this again next time, make sure to give a heads up in advance." As soon as his voice fell, the ground beneath his feet trembled slightly again. "Still coming?" There was no earth-shattering upheaval. The vibration stopped after a few seconds, and at the original location of the pond, the soil slowly subsided, forming a deeper pit. Its edges were smooth and neat, looking as if they had been artificially trimmed, and its area was nearly twice as large as before. Wudi looked at the pit, and then raised his eyes to look at the world tree. "You have this skill too? Can the vegetable patch be restored?" The giant tree stood quietly, its branches and leaves motionless, without the slightest response. After waiting for a while with no movement, Wudi did not dwell on it either, turning around to exit the domain space. As soon as he returned to the carriage, Lin Yui immediately came up to him. "Big brother Wudi, has the world tree changed? Is the change big?" "Very big." Wudi nodded, not mentioning the specific situation inside. Sister Wanwan!" Lin Yu turned back and shouted, let's go in and take a look." Just as Lin Shi got up, she was dragged by her toward the space entrance. Su Wanwan held Xiao Shi's hand and followed closely. Although Zhu Kexen had an injury on her back, she couldn't resist her curiosity and stiffly moved closer. Several people filed in one after another, and the carriage instantly emptied out. Commander Chu Ling leaned against the passenger seat, looking out the window like a statue, completely indifferent to the changes in the domain space. Wudi glanced at her, sat back in the driver's seat, and began to calculate where today's talent enhancement should be used. First, rule out the physique aspect. Over the past 2 days, under the amplification of the Silver Shadow sculpture and the Life and Death Together contract, the spirit attribute had already reached 34.5. It didn't look low, but compared to the 1,668 points of physique, it was dozens of orders of magnitude behind. Before finding props that could significantly boost spirit, stacking physique further was completely meaningless, not to mention that it didn't improve his strength in the slightest. He even suspected that certain aspects of him had definitely been affected. If this wasn't resolved, it would be absolutely impossible to continue improving his physique. Thinking of this, Wudi raised his hand and touched the black metal ring on his right wrist, Titan's Wrath. This mecha hadn't been moved for a long time. The crises at this stage had left it gathering dust for quite a while. Secondly, weapons didn't need to be considered either. The 2 main cannons on the vehicle, the 30mm howitzer and the Ludon close-in defense rotary cannon, could both automatically recover ammunition. Coupled with the amplification of the Silver Shadow sculpture, they could recover twice a day, and the firepower was completely sufficient. Not to mention there was also Zero. In battles of that intensity from the previous stage, Zero had never encountered an opponent whenever it made a move. Only now did Wudi truly comprehend the weight of eternal grade props. They had always been acquired too easily, so he hadn't felt much about it. Now it seemed that props of this level shouldn't have appeared at this stage at all. Furthermore, under Zero's command, there were nearly 100 Xuanjia warriors. Wudi even thought that if this stage was a normal planet, letting Zero and all the Xuanjia warriors out would probably clear out all the players in this region. Defense didn't even need to be mentioned. Wudi glanced at the law-grade geomagnetic symbiosis armor in the vehicle information bar and shook his head. Things that could break through its defense at this stage probably hadn't even spawned yet. Calculating this and that, it turned out that the most basic aspect of survival was the one that got stuck. There were 7 people in the team. Aside from Xiao Shi and Commander Chu Ling, whose physiques weren't calculated in detail, none of the rest had a physique lower than 100 points. The higher the physique, the greater the consumption, and the food eaten every day started at twice that of ordinary people. Added with Xiao Shi and Commander Chu Ling, supplies plummeted quickly. Previously, they had hoarded a lot from the system supermarket, so they hadn't felt it. During this period, relying purely on opening supply crates to supplement, the inventory dropped visibly to the naked eye. Woody finally understood why people in the communication channel were asking to buy food every day. For an ordinary team, it would be difficult just to survive, let alone a high-end team like theirs where everyone was fully equipped. Woody suddenly remembered that vast expanse of land in the domain space. Previously, crops matured in 3 days, but after the world tree grew tall for the first time, its growth rate slowed down. Now the space had directly expanded 5-fold and even grew a wild jungle. Would the planting efficiency change? If they could get livestock and poultry and raise them directly in the space, could they achieve complete self-sufficiency? "Which direction should I upgrade after all?" he muttered to himself. "Commander." The center console screen suddenly lit up, and Xiaoxi's voice rang out. "Are you considering the RV's upgrade direction? Do you need me to provide reference suggestions?" Woody looked up at the center console screen, somewhat surprised. "Let's hear it." "First priority, the vehicle's biochemical defense has flaws. Currently, the overall sealing of the vehicle body is insufficient. In the event of a virus or spore-like biochemical crisis, there is a risk of internal contamination. It is recommended to prioritize expanding the internal space and establishing an independent air isolation room and a disinfection channel." Wu Di was stunned for a moment. He really hadn't thought in this direction. Watching biochemical crises in movies and television before, he always felt they were very far away from him. If he really ran into a virus-type level, relying on the RV's current sealing, it would be equivalent to being completely undefended. But on second thought, it felt wrong. If such a must-die game really appeared and even he couldn't withstand it, wouldn't ordinary players all die? This survival game shouldn't create an unsolvable death trap. Is there more? Second priority, it is recommended to build a communication and monitoring network. After completion, I can directly take over the engineering robots in the domain space and perform basic construction, planting, maintenance, and other tasks. At the same time, it is recommended that you prioritize collecting construction materials and industrial blueprints. After database matching is completed, I can achieve automated production and processing. Currently, the reserve of related blueprints is 0. After listening, Wu Di was a bit speechless. It wasn't that he didn't want to get them, he simply couldn't get them at all. Lin Yu stared at the trading channel every day, but things like construction blueprints and industrial equipment hadn't even cast a shadow. What circulated on the market was either weapons and ammunition or food and medicine. Things related to infrastructure had never been seen. Even in the previous stage, they hadn't managed to get any. Wu Di suspected that this was intentional by the survival game. The only residential module that appeared had already been installed in the domain space. Leaning back into his seat, Wu Di's gaze fell on the wilderness, rapidly retreating outside the window. He suddenly thought that what Xiaoxi said wasn't without reason. The crises they encountered had always been much stronger than those of ordinary players. If a similar situation really occurred, wouldn't they be finished directly? He wouldn't dare to gamble on whether he could withstand it. Wu Di looked at a blueprint in his personal space. Vehicle constant temperature and purification air conditioner design blueprint. Purple quality. Vehicle prop, realizing precise constant temperature control for the entire carriage, with a temperature adjustment range of -10 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius. Comes with a triple air purification system, which can filter out most harmful gases and dust, continuously release negative oxygen ions, and increases energy consumption by 5%. Installation requirement, level 2 and above vehicle. Manufacturing requirements: 10 metal blocks, 10 electronic components, 5 plastics, 5 quantum essence. This was a blueprint opened from Su Wanwan's talent treasure chest earlier, chapter 254, except it had never been used. He was silent for a long time, and ultimately chose to manufacture it directly. Looking at the vehicle constant temperature and purification air conditioner in his personal space, Wu Di sighed. He still didn't dare to gamble. If it weren't for Xiao Shi's prompt just now, he could have tried to first strengthen the blueprint and then strengthen the finished product. But Xiao Shi's words instead made him worry. Chapter 384, Daytime Abnormality. Inside the RV, Wu Di looked at the rapidly retreating wilderness outside the window, assuming that today would be just like yesterday and nothing would happen. The center console screen suddenly lit up, and Xiao Shi's voice rang out simultaneously. "Commander, a small shelter has been detected ahead. There are a large number of monsters around, numbering 120. We have slowed down. Detailed monster information has been synchronized to the center console screen." Wu Di looked at the center console screen in surprise. What was going on? Monster name: Heavy Armor Shadow Soldier. Basic information: advanced shadow creatures of the Dark Tide stage, humanoid combat units condensed from high-density shadow energy, covered entirely in native shadow armor, with an average height of about 2 meters and basic action logic. Core skills: 1. Heavy Axe / attacks by swinging a giant shadow axe, which can easily break through blue-quality vehicle armor and poses a certain degree of threat to armor above purple quality. 2. Cluster Shield. When 3 or more gather, they generate a shared shadow shield, reducing a certain amount of physical damage. Characteristics: attracted by high-concentration shadow energy. They can be active during the day for a short time, and have strong tracking properties for the breath of living things. Weaknesses: the armor coverage of the joints is weak. Strong light irradiation will cause sluggish movement. Wu Di frowned slightly. Isn't this the kind of monster outside the stone door of the shelter last night? Why would they appear during the day too? Before he could think deeply, Xiao Shi's voice sounded again. "Commander, should the weapon system be activated for clearance?" "Xiao Shi, switch to the real-time footage," Wu Di said. Commander switched. The image on the center console screen shifted. The stone door of the shelter ahead was tightly closed, and dense heavy armor shadow soldiers surrounded the door. The giant axes in their hands flickered with a cold light, blocking the area layer upon layer impenetrably. "Stop!" The RV slowly stopped a few hundred meters away from the shelter. Wu Di stared at the screen in contemplation. Something was wrong. What did high-concentration shadow energy mean? These shadow creatures surrounded and blocked the door of the shelter. Could there be something inside? There might be someone inside. Commander Chu Ling suddenly spoke, her voice low yet clear. Wu Di turned his head in astonishment to look at her. "I am just guessing, otherwise why would it be like this?" Commander Chu Ling said in a flat tone. Wu Di froze for a moment, then reacted. What Commander Chu Ling said wasn't impossible, but Wu Di still didn't quite believe this reason. It wasn't that he doubted whether there were people inside, but rather he felt it impossible for any players to provoke these monsters. Pondering for a few seconds, he withdrew his gaze and commanded calmly, "Xiao Shi, clear out these monsters." No matter what the situation was, once they were cleared out, he would know after going in. "Received, Commander. Road shield close-in weapon system has been activated." A faint mechanical turning sound came from the roof of the RV, and the next second, dense gunfire suddenly erupted. Tat-tat-tat-tat. Tongues of fire spewed out from the roof, and the bullets formed a metal torrent, sweeping toward the direction of the shelter. Wu Di stared at the screen. The moment the barrage fell, the heavy armor shadow soldiers surrounding the door all turned their heads simultaneously, their empty eye sockets aiming toward the RV side, as if instantly locking onto the source of the attack. The next second, they actually abandoned the stone door and charged toward the RV in groups. These things were not brainless dead objects. As soon as this thought flashed through Wu Di's mind, the barrage had already swept into the group of monsters. The shields of the heavy armor shadow soldiers were like paper in front of the close-in weapon system's barrage, shattering at a single touch. The armor shattered, and the front row instantly turned into black mist and dissipated. The momentum of the charge had just started, only to be forcefully pressed back. In just over a dozen seconds, More than 100 heavy armor shadow soldiers didn't even touch the edge of the RV before they all dissipated halfway. The road was clean, without even a shred of residue left. "Commander, all targets have been cleared, and the monster corpses have dissipated. This consumption is 1,500 rounds of ammunition." Wu Di had no expression. The power of the road shield close-in weapon system was fierce enough, but once turned on, the bullets poured out like water and couldn't be stopped at all. Fortunately, the ammunition volume automatically refreshes daily. If he really had to rely on supply crates for replenishment, he couldn't afford such a money-swallowing beast. Looking at the empty road, Wu Di suddenly thought of a problem. Since entering the second stage, all killed monsters would directly dissipate after death, leaving not even a corpse. Without monster meat, when players were injured, they relied entirely on items that increased physique to recover. In the previous stage, everyone huddled in their vehicle, making it difficult for monsters to hurt people. But the rules of this stage forced players to get out of the car for activities. If there was a large-scale melee, injuries were inevitable. Just like yesterday when Zhu Kexen carelessly took a fireball, for ordinary players, it would probably cost half their lives. An idea suddenly popped into Wu Di's mind. If there were no transaction restrictions, would this count as a business opportunity? He opened his personal space, and his gaze fell on the blueprint extracted from Su Wanwan's talent treasure chest in the previous stage, Chapter 307. Quick-acting physical potion production blueprint. After taking it, it can restore 30% stamina, taking effect within 10 seconds. The efficacy is mild and has no side effects. Taking more than 3 doses in a single day will reduce the efficacy, and the effect fluctuates with the user's physique. Permanently unlocks the formula after learning. Production materials: round leaf grass ×1, white floss flower ×1. Big Brother Wu Di. At the entrance of the domain space, Lin Yue ran out in a flurry, her face full of joy. "Look what good thing I dug up." She ran up to Wu Di and quickly displayed an item. Cyan-veined cypress bed, blue quality. Crafted from a century-old cyan-veined cypress, the wood naturally has the effect of calming the mind and soothing the spirit. When lying down to rest, the recovery speed of stamina and spirit is increased. The required sleep time is reduced, and long-term mental fatigue can be slightly alleviated. "I traded it for 300 units of fuel. Didn't I make a huge profit?" Wu Di glanced at it. This thing was indeed a good thing for ordinary players, especially lone wolves. Having the rest time meant having half more time to hurry and scavenge supply crates. But for their team it was of little use. Not to mention that there were many people taking turns. Just the high physique of everyone meant the rest time needed was already short. Plus with Xiaoxi on 24/7 duty, they didn't care about this bit of recovery speed at all. "Big Brother Wu Di, do you think there will be higher-level furniture in the future?" Lin Yu asked casually. Hearing Lin Yu's words, Wu Di, who didn't care at first, felt a stir in his heart. He thought of the silver shadow sculpture. Keep an eye out for it. Thinking of this, he looked at Lin Yue and said, "Any furniture and props with attribute bonuses and recovery effects can be acquired, as long as the price is right." "Rest assured, Big Brother Wu Di," Lin Yue patted her chest, "leave this matter to me, and I guarantee to handle it properly for you. Commander, should we enter the shelter ahead?" Xiaoxi's voice rang out again. Wu Di only then reacted that the RV was still parked on the road. "Drive in." Chapter 384 Flesh Vehicle. The RV slowly started and drove toward the shelter. Sensing the vehicle approaching, the stone gate slowly slid inward. The moment it drove in, the system popped up a prompt stating that this was only a small shelter. And in the corner of the shelter, a single vehicle was parked all alone. As soon as the vehicle in the corner came into view, Lin Yu frowned tightly and instinctively shrank back half a step. That did not look like a normal vehicle at all. A layer of dark reddish-brown flesh tissue was smeared over the pure black metal frame, as if forcibly melted onto the car shell by high temperature. Blue-black blood vessel lines bulged on the surface, slowly writhing with a certain rhythm. The car windows had long since lacked glass, replaced by a translucent, turbid stratum corneum, covered in a layer of sticky, slippery liquid that trickled down the car body, pooling into a small puddle on the ground. Dense black fuzz grew along the edges of the metal box on the roof, swaying gently whenever the wind blew, and yellowish mucus still oozed from the cracks. The entire vehicle was like a half-dead giant tumor, paralyzed in the shadows, exuding a weirdness and nausea that penetrated deep into the bone marrow. "Commander, a player has been detected inside the vehicle, and their vital signs are stable." Xiaoxi's voice rang out at the right time. Wudi stared at the bloody vehicle, his brows slightly furrowed. It was his first time seeing such a thing. Could this even be considered a vehicle? Could it be that so many monsters surrounded the outside just for this ghost thing? At this moment, inside the modified flesh vehicle, the tall and thin man pressed against the corneal car window with a pale face. Yesterday, in an uninhabited large shelter, he had opened the Flesh Symbiosis Vehicle Modification Manual. Although its appearance was terrifying after the modification, the benefits were real. The vehicle body could slowly self-heal by absorbing flesh and shadow energy, and collisions came with a corrosive effect. At night in the dark tide environment, it could directly absorb shadow energy for power, saving more than half of the fuel. It could even evade attacks from shadow creatures to a certain extent. However, the drawbacks were equally fatal. The vehicle would continuously emit a biological fishy odor, attracting shadow monsters to gather even during the day. After modification, the vehicle level was permanently locked at level 5, and it could no longer be upgraded upward. Long-term driving would also slowly erode the driver's spirit state. He had originally been hiding in the shelter, deliberately luring a group of monsters to block the door, wanting to see if any passing players and monsters would suffer both losses so he could go out and pick up scraps. Yet, he never expected that in just a moment of commotion, the monsters outside had already been cleared away. Hearing the sound of the stone gate opening, his heart beat wildly, and he clutched the rifle in his hand tightly. Wudi, Lin Yue, and Commander Chu Ling got out of the car and stopped a few meters away from the flesh vehicle. Lin Yue covered her nose, moved forward half a step, and shouted loudly, "Hurry up and get down, people inside. If you don't come down, we're going to take action. Later I'll blow you and your car upside down." After shouting, she quickly shrank back again. The stench of rot mixed with the metallic fishy smell made one's temples throb. The man in the car struggled for a few seconds. Should he fight it out? After agonizing for a long time, the man gritted his teeth. He had heard the dense sounds just now clearly. The other party possessed heavy firepower. If they really fell out, he would definitely die. Going down might still leave him a way out. Creak? The car door was pushed open from the inside, and the tall and thin man walked down slowly holding a rifle, his face pale and his eyes full of vigilance. "Don't attack. I mean no harm." "You're a player. How did your car turn into this ghost of a thing?" Lin Yu covered her nose and spoke first. The man's Adam's apple moved, and his voice was tight. "It was driven out yesterday from an uninhabited large shelter. The Flesh Symbiosis Modification Manual." "What's the use after modifying it?" Wu Di spoke, his tone plain, with no emotion discernible. "It can repair the car body itself relying on flesh and shadow energy, and it comes with a corrosive effect when ramming people." The man swallowed his saliva and honestly confessed. "At night in the dark tide, it can also absorb shadow energy as power, saving fuel, and monsters won't actively crowd around." "And the price?" The man's face turned pale. "It will emit a fishy odor during the day and attract monsters. The vehicle level is permanently locked at level 5 and can never be upgraded. Driving it for a long time will also affect the spirit state." After finishing, he gripped the rifle in his hand tightly, his fingertips turning slightly white. The anticipated attack did not arrive. Instead, he saw that the three people had already turned around and got on the RV. With the close of the door, the RV started immediately. Turning the car head, it drove straight out of the shelter. The stone gate slowly closed, leaving only him and that modified flesh vehicle in the empty space. The man stood in place, looking bewildered. Just like that, they left. Not robbing supply crates, not killing people. Inside the RV, Lin Yue was still muttering, "To think there is such a weird modification manual, turning a car into that ghost of a shape with an upper limit of only level 5. They really managed to think of it." To survive. Commander Chu Ling sat on the side, her voice very faint. Lin Yu turned her head to look at her. Mr. Wu has sufficient strength, so naturally he doesn't need to choose this kind of path. Commander Chu Ling raised her eyes to look at the rapidly receding weeds outside the window. But most people are different. Given a choice, no one would be willing to modify their car like that. Lin Yue was slightly stunned, pressed her lips together without speaking, and lowered her head into deep thought. Wu Di sat in the driver's seat, his fingertips gently tapping the armrest. This kind of modification manual that quenched thirst with poison could not possibly appear out of thin air. The system releasing such props clearly provided a shortcut for ordinary players, exchanging future upper limits and side effects for immediate combat power. However, this kind of modification was obviously a characteristic unique to this stage. What about the next stage? And what on earth was the purpose of the characteristic of attracting monsters during the day? If it simply hoped for players to die, this survival game had no need to use such a method at all. He casually clicked open the communication channel, and messages were scrolling by rapidly. Isn't this stage too peaceful? Strolled around all morning during the day, didn't even see a shadow of a monster. Peaceful. Over 8,000 people have died, and you're telling me it's peaceful. Heh, isn't it all players killing each other? Fighting bloody heads over a few supplies? People are much more terrifying than monsters. Indeed, the monsters outside at night aren't scary. Hiding in the shelter, they can't get in. What's truly fatal are the other people in the shelter. Anyone encountered monsters during the day? Did anyone open the door last night to see what was outside? Today is only the 3rd day. Are you in a rush to die? You people can come here and bark after surviving for another 3 days. Why is this kind of dog barking everywhere? A few supplies? Are those bullets and supplies a joke? I fucking only have 200 rounds of bullets left. There are humanoid monsters everywhere. Last night we ran into a team of beauties with 2 hidden gun barrels on the roof of their RV, at least of golden quality. Fierce as hell, they directly opened the door and riddled everything outside with bullets. It's recommended that everyone keep the supplies obtained from the exclusive supply crate well. They will definitely be used in later stages. This survival game couldn't possibly give players benefits for nothing. Why are those 2 modification manuals still hanging on the trading channel? Are there no big shots in this stage? A team of beauties? Brother, didn't you make a move? Chapter 386, Intelligent Growth. With a swipe of his fingertip, Wu Di directly closed the communication channel. It was back and forth empty chatter, without a single piece of truly valuable information. Glancing at the time, it was time to eat, so he called out to Commander Chu Ling and directly entered the domain space. Inside the living module, a table full of food was laid out in the living room. Lin Yu shoveled a mouthful of rice as she kept muttering, "The changes in here are just too huge. When I took a stroll around this morning, I almost didn't recognize the place. That little grove at the corner is even more outrageous." Shu Keksen took a bite of bread and chimed in vaguely, "I reckon it's at least 1,000 square meters. The trees look so weird, nothing like anything seen in reality, and the leaves are a deep dark green that feels rock hard to the touch. Big Brother Wu Di, if it keeps growing like this, I'm afraid this place is going to form a complete ecosystem of its own. Lin Yu's eyes lit up. By then, with mountains, water, and woods, it won't be any different from a real world. Su Wanwan put down her chopsticks and gently frowned. The space has expanded fivefold, and the world tree has grown this big. Won't the energy consumption rise along with it? What if one day? Don't worry, Sister Wanwan. If there really were a problem, Xiao Shi would have definitely said something long ago. Lin Yu waved her hand. Besides, could Big Brother Wudi possibly let it run out of energy? Zhao Yu, see if you can collect a few more seeds in the next few days, Lin Shi said to Lin Yu, then looked at everyone else. Let's try again and see how the planting results are now. Sister, I've been keeping an eye on it, but people these days are too shrewd. The prices have gone up a lot. Lin Shi nodded without saying much, simply picking up a piece of food for Xiaoya by her side. From beginning to end, no one mentioned the vegetable patch and pond being shaken out of existence. After finishing the meal, Wudi called out to Lin Yu, talent amplification. You got it! Having used her talent, Lin Yu looked at the departing Wudi with a face full of confusion. What was going on? He had never avoided them like this in the past. Could he be planning some big move? Thinking of this, Lin Yu quickly stepped out of the domain space, lay down in the passenger seat, and while keeping an eye on the outside situation, paid attention to the vehicle's information interface. As for Wudi, he turned and walked onto the world tree. The 50-meter-tall giant tree blocked out the sky, and standing underneath it and looking up, he couldn't even see the top of the canopy. The bark was warm and rough. Pressing his palm against it, he seemed to be able to feel a faint pulse of life. He didn't even know why he had subconsciously come here. Sitting beneath the world tree, Wudi glanced at his personal space, his gaze lingering on a blueprint. Biochemical Protection Unit Design Blueprint, purple quality. It was something he had reinforced through his talent a long time ago. Chapter 180. And he hadn't planned in this direction until now. Since Xiao Shi had mentioned the shortcoming in biochemical defense, he would make up for this gap. He raised a hand to stroke the tree trunk and muttered softly, "Give me some good luck." The leaves rustled and swayed slightly, like a breeze blowing past with no other response. Wudi didn't mind either. With a thought, he activated his talent. Ding! Do you choose the Biochemical Protection Unit Design Blueprint? Purple, as the main sacrifice, and the vehicle constant temperature purifying air conditioner. Purple, as the secondary sacrifice? Yes. Ding. Talent usage successful. Item promoted to Tier 2. Acquired. Vehicle filtering constant temperature air conditioner orange. Seeing the words promoted to Tier 2, Wudi let out a soft sigh. It was the guaranteed baseline again. He really wasn't any sort of lucky European emperor. If he could skip tiers and promote every single time, the quality of the items on his vehicle would have long since reached the heavens. Although orange quality was top-tier goods out of reach for ordinary players, the critical parts on his vehicle all started at red. This orange one was truly a bit underwhelming. He clicked on the item details to check them out. Vehicle filtering constant temperature air conditioner, orange quality. Vehicle item, an automated vehicle temperature control device with integrated environmental perception. Requiring no manual operation, it real-time collects external data to automatically calibrate the temperature inside the vehicle, with the temperature control range locked at 0 to 30 dGz. After the item is installed, it synchronously completes the sealing and locking of the entire vehicle, closing the gaps in the car body and isolating the intrusion of external air. The core operating components are not interfered with by the external environment, coming with its own air purification module, and the machine operates completely silently throughout. Additionally equipped with an electrolytic oxygen generation module, it can generate oxygen by consuming vehicle energy and onboard stored water to cope with sealed, oxygen-deficient environments. Installation requirement, Level 4 and above vehicle. Wudi stared at the effects for a few seconds and couldn't help muttering under his breath. Turns out in the end, It's still just an air conditioner. Clearly, the main sacrifice was a biochemical protection unit, but the final product still had an air conditioner as its base, merely stacking a layer of filtering functions on top. Calling it biochemical protection is more like a luxury upgraded version of an air conditioner. The only eye-catching part was the oxygen generation module, but the domain space inside the RV was already a large-scale oxygen generation module in itself. Giving such a useful function to them was truly a waste. He shook his head and didn't dwell on it anymore. At the present stage, something was better than nothing, and if he really encountered a biochemical-type crisis, it could hold out for a while. If there were higher-level blueprints in the future, he would just replace it then. Strive to do better next time. He patted the tree trunk and turned to walk out of the domain space. Returning to the cab, Wu Di clicked to install it on the system panel. Xiaoxi, I've installed a new item for you. Commander, it has been connected to the vehicle system and incorporated into global control. Xiaoxi's voice immediately sounded, paused for a moment, and added, lacking an independent isolation unit, relying solely on the filtering module has insufficient protection levels, and there is a risk of pollution penetration. It is recommended that the commander subsequently supplement an isolation cabin to improve the biochemical defense system. Clearly, it was a sweet and steady female voice with not much fluctuation in tone, but Wu Di inexplicably caught a hint of a jubilant tune, like a child who had gotten a new part. He raised an eyebrow. Xiaoxi, are you very happy? System operational load reduced. Protection redundancy increased by 17%, judged as positive yield. Xiaoxi's voice remained steady. Commander, using human emotional analogy, it is close to pleasure. Wu Di became interested, leaned against the back of his chair, and asked, when did you learn that? Commander, just now after you adopted Xiaoxi's suggestion. Xiaoxi paused, her voice softening a bit. After the world tree evolved, the energy field fluctuations in the domain space strengthened, which seems to have produced a positive catalytic effect on my core module. She paused for half a second and added another sentence. Commander, Xiaoxi judges that more interaction and more communication should accelerate the model's evolution speed. Wu Di was deep in thought. From initially only mechanically executing instructions to now being able to actively make suggestions, simulate emotional feedback, and even proactively state methods to accelerate evolution, Xiaoxi's intelligent growth speed was much faster than he had anticipated. He didn't ask further, simply giving a faint instruction, continue monitoring road conditions. Received, Commander. The status indicator light on the side of the center control screen flashed gently, like a silent response. Chapter 387 Blood Red Invitation Card. At 15:30 in the afternoon, the central control screen gently lit up, and Xiaoxi's voice came out. Commander, a shelter has been detected ahead and we are about to enter. Shu Kexen was slumped in the passenger seat, and upon hearing this she propped herself up. Xiaoxi, let's go. Drive in and see what level it is. Lin Yu bounced down from the sofa in the back, hurried over to the front row in a few steps, and peered outside against the glass. Sister Shu, what level do you guess this one is? Is there anyone inside? The heavy stone door slowly slid open, revealing a spacious interior with neat stone walls, completely empty without even the shadow of a vehicle. The moment the RV entered, the three of them all received system prompts. Large shelter detected, capacity, 15 people. It's a large shelter, hey. Lin Yu tilted her head to look at Wu Di and asked, Big Brother Wu Di, are we staying here today, or continuing forward? If we go further ahead, we might be able to loot a few more supply crates. Right here. Wu Di shook his head, his tone devoid of any fluctuation. It doesn't matter if we have a bit fewer supplies. Running further ahead has too many variables. Over the past 3 days, although they encountered quite a few shelters every day, they were basically small and medium-sized ones. In the first 2 days, they basically only encountered large shelters in the last 2 hours or so. Wu Di had asked Xiaoxi to analyze the pattern of shelter appearances, but Xiaoxi's reply was that they appeared randomly. He didn't dare to gamble. Although there would be a few fewer supply crates, at the very least they wouldn't miss a shelter. Especially at this stage, the road was still the same as before. It seemed that every road and what was encountered by the roadside at any moment was different. If they walked forward for a bit longer after turning back, this shelter might never be found again. Under Xiaoxi's control, the RV drove into the innermost corner as usual and stopped steadily. Over the next 2 hours, the stone door opened and closed intermittently 4 or 5 times. Every time a vehicle approached, the moment the stone door slid open a crack, whether having received a system prompt or seeing the RV parked inside clearly, almost all of them said nothing, slammed on the gas, turned around, and left, without even stepping inside to test the waters. Is it necessary? Xu Kexin leaned against the body of the car, watching yet another vehicle speeding away, and scoffed. They're all acting like frightened birds, and we're such a friendly team. Sister Xu, they must be worried there are too many people. Lin Yu lowered her head to look at the trading channel and said without lifting her head, The communication channel has been talking about it all along. When you encounter a large shelter, running away is the right move. Xiao Yu, that's other people. Look at how comfortable those 2 groups of people were last night. They got through the crisis just by lying down. Time drifted like this until 1740, and the few of them had long finished dinner in the domain space. Lin Yu pulled 2 brand-new decks of playing cards out of her personal space, slapped them onto the ground, and raised her chin like she was presenting a treasure. Look, what is this? Everyone turned to look. Xu Kexin's eyes instantly went straight. Xiao Yu, did you trade for this? Holy crap, we finally have proper entertainment props. She turned her head and waved at the side. Sixi Wanwan, come over quickly. Let's get a table together for landlord. After shouting, she looked toward Commander Chu Ling not far away, opening her mouth just as she wanted to call out, only to see the latter glance over expressionlessly. Commander Chu Ling, can't you have a few more expressions? You're like a block of stone. She sheepishly rubbed her nose, muttered a sentence, then turned back to look at Wu Dai and said, Boss, you and Commander Chu Ling really match. No one took up her conversation. Lin Shi and Su Wanwan came over and sat down, and Xiaoya also squeezed in beside them. 4 girls sat around a table, the shuffling sound of cards rustling loudly. Right at this moment, the sound of an engine came from far to near, and the stone door slowly opened once again. Several people stopped their hands simultaneously, poking their heads to look toward the entrance as a black SUV drove in. Eh? Lin Yu spoke first. Sisters, why does this car look so familiar? Xu Kexin squinted and looked for 2 seconds. Holy crap, isn't this the glasses kid from yesterday? As soon as the black SUV stopped steadily, the driver's side window rolled down. Wenbin pushed his glasses up, looked at the RV in the corner, twitched the corner of his mouth, revealed a smile uglier than crying, and said loudly, Everyone, we meet again. He sighed inwardly. There really was no escaping them. Running into this team had the advantage that tonight was most likely stable, and safety wouldn't be much of a problem. The disadvantage was also very obvious, as today's exclusive supply crate definitely wouldn't have anything to do with him again. I'll go over and say hello. It's rare to run into a repeat customer. Xu Kexin stood up with a chuckle and walked outside. Seeing Wu Di nod slightly, Xu Kexin gave Lin Yu a wink. Lin Yu immediately followed, and the 2 walked side by side toward the black SUV. It's fate, glasses, brother. Only separated by a day, and we run into each other again. Xu Kexin spoke with a smile, her tone casual. The usual rules? Wenbin nodded as if resigning himself to his fate. All right, the usual rules. The exclusive supply crate belongs to you. Tonight I absolutely won't cause you any trouble. Refreshing. Xu Kexin snapped her fingers. Then let's each stay in our own places. Call us if anything happens tonight. After speaking, the two turned around and left without lingering much. Wenbin sighed, glanced in the direction of Su Kexin and the other person, then withdrew his gaze and drove the SUV directly to the corner. From then until exactly 18, the stone door never opened again. In the huge, large shelter, there were only their two teams. At exactly 18, Su Wanwan's daily talent treasure chest refreshed on time. She clicked it directly, and a blueprint appeared. Blueprint for rough three-piece bedding set. Blue quality. Adopts wear-resistant and stain-resistant composite textile fabric. The whole set includes a duvet cover, bed sheet, and pillowcases, effectively improving sleep quality. Energy recovery efficiency is increased under the same rest duration. Permanently unlocks this blueprint after use. Crafting requirements: rubber 5, plastic 5. Hey, Sister Wanwan, isn't this a set with the bed I traded for? Lin Yu leaned over to take a look and asked curiously. At this time, Su Kexin walked in from outside. Just as she turned into the corner, she casually pulled the exclusive supply crate out of her personal space and placed it on the ground in front of everyone. Zixi, today's crate. Lin Shi nodded, her fingertips pressing onto the lid of the crate. The moment the crate disappeared, the tips of her brows raised slightly, clearly stunned for a moment. Large shelter reinforcement blueprint, exclusive prop, ×1. Shadow dispersal ammunition, exclusive prop, ×500. Dark tide resistance potion, exclusive prop, ×15. Temporary shielding coating, exclusive prop, ×5. Shadow Labyrinth invitation card, exclusive special prop. Big Brother Wu Di, a special prop drop this time. After finishing, Lin Shi picked it up directly from her personal space. Everyone's gazes all turned toward Lin Shi's hands. A red card with twisted, intertwined patterns printed on the front, resembling a labyrinth, yet also like some kind of obscure rune. At the very top, a line of blood-red numbers was ticking down second by second, 29, 57, 29 to 56. Below the card was another line of small text, instructions for use. All surviving players within the shelter will automatically participate in the challenge, and will be uniformly teleported in after the countdown ends. Chapter 388, Shadow Labyrinth Dungeon. The few of them looked at the blood-red invitation letter with its constantly ticking countdown, and all fell silent. Wu Di's gaze fell onto the card, his eyes sinking slightly. Mandatory participation for all members. This was the first time they had encountered such an item. The previous Research Institute No. 7 dungeon at least allowed them to choose whether to enter or not. This time, not only was there no choice, but it was also locked into a countdown. Could it be that once the time was up, they would be teleported away directly? Boss, it's a dungeon. Su Kexin reacted first, her eyes lighting up. Does this mean we don't have to huddle inside the shelter anymore, and can go stretch our legs somewhere else? Big Brother Wu Di, it really is a dungeon. Lin Yu also leaned over to take a look and said curiously, There were so many people last time. I wonder what it will be like this time. Both of them had experienced a dungeon before, so they just treated it as changing scenes to farm resources, not panicking in the slightest. Su Wanwan, however, frowned and said, It says all players within the shelter. Does that refer solely to our shelter, or all shelters? Surely a large scale of players hasn't been dragged in, right? Probably not, Lin Shi shook her head. If it really were all players, the commotion couldn't possibly be this small. Most likely just like the Research Institute last time, only the shelter that triggered the invitation letter will be sucked in. Who cares how many people there are? Su Kexin waved her hand dismissively. With Xiaoxi and Zero here, no matter how many people come, they'll just be delivering food. That's right, big sis. When have we ever not sliced right through everything? Lin Yu said while gesturing with her hands. It wasn't just the two of them thinking this. Wu Di had pretty much the same judgment in his heart. It was just a dungeon. To him, it was simply an extra resource supply. The only slightly unusual thing was that all surviving players were forced to participate, and he had no idea what the situation would actually be like this time. As the few of them discussed, the countdown continued to tick down second by second. 003, 002, 001. The moment the numbers hit 0, the invitation letter violently burst out with white light, instantly submerging everyone's vision. What the fuck? What's going on? I knew nothing good would come from being with them. Wenbin on the other side was also enveloped by the white light simultaneously, his exclamations stuck in his throat. The white light came fast and went just as quickly. When Wu Dai opened his eyes, the first thing he perceived was a piercing, bone-chilling cold. The surroundings were empty. There was no RV, no Lin Shi and the others, and the familiar shelter was nowhere to be seen. He stood all alone in a narrow passageway. Right at that moment, the system panel popped up. Ding. Welcome to the Shadow Labyrinth Dungeon. Current participating players, 282 people. Dungeon rules. 1. All players will randomly descend upon various parts of the labyrinth. 2. Labyrinth-exclusive treasure chests exist in the core area of the labyrinth. 3. Surviving for a full 3 hours will allow automatic departure from the dungeon. 4. All means of communication are prohibited inside the dungeon. Wu Di's fingertips moved slightly, and he first clicked open the team channel. The input box was gray. The send button was completely dimmed, and not even half a message could be sent out. He switched to the public communication channel again. Messages were refreshing extremely fast, yet all the messages were still the same as before. No one whatsoever mentioned this labyrinth dungeon. Wu Di glanced at it twice before closing the system panel. He stood in place, quickly calculating the situation of everyone else. Lin Shi and the others all had personal space, always carried weapons with them, and their physique were all above 100 points, making self-preservation more than enough. Although Commander Chuling did not have a spatial storage, her martial prowess and physique were on par with Shu Kexen. Encountering any situation, she probably wouldn't run into issues, and Wu Di even felt that Commander Chuling might be safer than Lin Shi and the others. The most troublesome one was Xiaoya. Being a child, she had no weapons on her and no proper combat experience. If she really ended up alone in the labyrinth, whether she encountered players or monsters, it would be dangerous. He had to find her as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Wu Di raised his eyes to size up his surroundings. Call it a labyrinth, yet it wasn't an ordinary stone wall passageway. The rock walls on both sides were dark reddish-brown, their surfaces oozing greasy mucus, resembling the inner walls of some creature. The overhead was hidden in black fog, making its height unclear light gray mist drifted in the passageway. Visibility was only a dozen meters, and low roars came from the distance from time to time. There were extremely many fork roads, twisting and turning, resembling intertwined blood vessels. Walking normally along the road, it might not even be possible to touch the center in 3 hours, let alone find people. Wu Di's gaze turned cold. With a slight movement of his mind, the black metal ring on his right wrist instantly dissolved. In an instant, a 3-meter-tall dark purple metal giant stood in the passageway, its mecha surface shimmering with a cold metallic luster, and faint purple light shining in its eye sockets. Wu Di flexed the metal fingers, the sound of the joints colliding being dull and heavy. He didn't intend, nor have the time to slowly find a way out along the labyrinth. No matter how arcane this labyrinth was, it couldn't trap someone with true strength. He was no ordinary player, and there was no need to go in circles following the route drawn by the system. The next second, his right arm pulled back, carrying a heavy and fierce force, and he smashed a punch toward the reddish-brown passageway wall beside him. The flying gravel of shattered stones he had anticipated did not appear. The instant his fist smashed onto it, the rock wall seemed to have elasticity, the mucus on its surface plunging inward abruptly, swallowing more than half of his arm alive. The tactile sensation was sticky and warm, carrying a subtle wriggling feeling. It was not stone at all, but rather resembled the flesh and blood inner walls of some creature. Wu Di frowned. just as he wanted to exert force to break free. A sharp, piercing pain suddenly came from the surface layer of Titan's Wrath's mecha, as if it was being violently stimulated by something. The metal components emitted a slight humming sound, and there was even a faint sense of repulsion. With a thought in his mind, he immediately put away the mecha. The dark purple liquid metal rapidly retracted and disappeared, recondensing into the black ring on his wrist. That needle prick-like sense of repulsion also vanished into thin air along with it, as if it had never appeared. Wu Di lowered his head to stroke the icy metal ring, whispering to himself, "What is going on here?" The rock wall was still slowly wriggling, as if trying to restore the depression he had just smashed out. In less than 1 minute, the original pit had already recovered as before. It seemed that forcibly breaking the wall wouldn't work. Even Titan's Wrath would be repelled by this labyrinth's environment. Wu Di raised his eyes to scan the several fork roads in front of him, casually chose the left one, and lifted his foot to step forward. Even without the mecha, it didn't have much of an impact. Nothing more than being a bit slower in speed. The passageway wound forward, the rock walls on both sides remaining identical dark reddish-brown, and the mucus slowly flowed down along the grain as if, yet the ground didn't have a trace of mucus. The gray mist never changed, the roars in the distance never stopped, sometimes far and sometimes near, as if echoing all around. Wu Di walked for a full half an hour, passing through more than a dozen fork junctions. Let alone a person's shadow. He hadn't even run into the shadow of half a creature. The roars were clearly right beside his ears. Yet looking out, the mist was empty and desolate, with nothing at all. The entire labyrinth was like a silent behemoth, using only sound as bait to lure people deeper and deeper. As Wu Di walked, he thought, why is nothing being encountered? What about other players? What kind of situation are they in? Chapter 389, The Suddenly Appearing Team. The footsteps in the mist grew from distant to near, chaotic and hurried. Wu Di stopped in his tracks, casting his gaze toward a fork on the left. Soon 4 figures drilled out from the gray mist, everyone holding a rifle with their muzzles instinctively pointing forward. Seeing clearly that there was only Wu Di alone, the few people slightly relaxed their vigilance, but their muzzles were not completely lowered. The one leading them was a burly man with a buzz cut, broad shoulders and a wide back, fierce eyes, and a tactical vest worn over his body. The remaining 3 followed behind him, keeping their postures very low, as if taking him as their leader. "Alone?" The burly man glanced at Wu Di. Seeing that he was empty-handed and calm in expression, not looking like a threat, his tone slowed down a bit. "My name is Brother Hu, and I gathered a team to explore this maze dungeon together. Want to join? Following me is much safer than you wandering around blindly alone." "Brother, why aren't you coming over yet?" A skinny lackey beside him immediately chimed in. "Brother Hugh is a big shot. His strength is something you wouldn't dare to imagine." Wu Di's gaze swept across the few people, calculating in his heart for 2 seconds. The situation in the maze was unclear, and following a team would instead allow him to figure out more rules. "All right." He nodded slightly, his voice calm. Seeing that he agreed so readily, the few people relaxed a bit more. The burly man also nodded with a hint of pride at the sight. Originally, he had always been a one-man team, having not met many living people for so long after coming to the survival world. His strength had greatly improved in the previous stage, and he was still regretting that there was nowhere to show off or anything, not expecting this opportunity to come so quickly. In just this short while, he experienced a sense of satisfaction that he had never obtained in the real world. The team continued to walk forward, and the skinny guy who had just spoken slowed his pace, edged closer to Wu Di, and lowered his voice to kindly remind him. "Brother, looking at you, you aren't living too badly. You should have some skills. But let me tell you, this Brother Hu, his physique attribute has already reached 48 points. Following him, You won't need to worry too much about whatever we encounter next." Wu Di responded faintly, without explaining much. "Right? How did you get in?" The skinny monkey casually asked again. "I was staying safely in the shelter, and suddenly a white light flashed, and I ended up here. Extremely bizarre." "Same. Wrapped in white light and I came in, not very clear about the rest." Wu Di explained a sentence. "Just like me, inexplicable. This survival world really is full of crises everywhere. Brother, what's your name? Your temperament is way too aloof. You probably haven't encountered few highway robbers before, right?" "Not bad. Haven't encountered many." "Is this personality of yours originally like this, or were you backstabbed in this survival world? I have a few friends who are also like you, and by now the grass on their graves has probably grown tall." The skinny guy seemed to be a social butterfly, and his words hadn't stopped for a short while. As they spoke, another three-way intersection appeared ahead, the three passages looking identical, with the mist rolling and no discernible differences. "Mouse? Which side?" Brother Hu stopped, turning his head to look at the man in the duckbill cap who hadn't spoken in the team all along. That man nodded, closed his eyes, and his fingertips trembled slightly, as if sensing something. After a few seconds, he opened his eyes and pointed to the leftmost passage. "This side." "All right," Brother Hu acknowledged, and immediately walked toward the left, with the rest of the team quickly following. The skinny guy edged close to Wu Di again, raising his chin toward the direction of the duckbill cap. "See that? The one called Mouse. I heard his talent is sensing biological signals. Monsters and people a bit further away can be clearly sensed. Thanks to him, we managed to gather so many people." Sure enough, after walking for another 20-odd minutes, they successively encountered 3 or 4 individually acting players along the way. With there being many of them, most chose to join temporarily, and the team quickly expanded from 5 people to 8. Yet not a single monster was encountered. It was unknown whether Mouse deliberately avoided them, or if they just didn't run into any. The roaring sounds still echoed in the mist, and every time they encountered a fork, Mouse would stop for a moment before guiding the direction. Having walked for nearly an hour, let alone treasure chests, not even the shadow of a creature was seen, and the entire passage still drifted with roaring sounds, appearing extremely bizarre. Brother Hugh's expression grew increasingly gloomy. Walking to a slightly wider corner, he stopped abruptly, turned around, and swept his gaze across everyone behind him. Everyone stopped for a moment. His voice was coarse and thick, carrying unquestionable firmness. "Now the situation is unclear, and no one can figure out the inner details of the maze. Those who want to continue following me to survive, report your respective talents and the props in your hands for unified allocation. Otherwise, you can scram right now." As soon as these words were said, the team instantly went quiet. Everyone's expression changed. Talents were the trump cards players relied on to make a living, and props were the family fortunes accumulated by risking their lives. How could there be any reason to easily hand them over? "Based on what?" A tall man stepped forward, his brows knitted into knots. "Everyone is just teaming up temporarily to look after each other. Talents are privacy, not to mention there's no danger now. Even if there really were danger, there is no reason to hand over all our bottom cards. The supplies were all accumulated by ourselves opening boxes. Why should we give them to you for unified allocation?" "Exactly. Trying to openly rob us." "Really treating yourself as the boss? We won't indulge you." The remaining few freelance players chimed in one after another, subconsciously leaning behind the tall man. In an instant, the 8 people split into 2 factions. 3 people stood on Brother Hu's side, while the remaining 4 all stood on the tall man's side. The 2 sides were separated by a distance of a few steps, and the atmosphere instantly became tense, as if drawing swords. Among everyone, only Wu Di stood in place without moving, like an outsider. The gazes of both factions landed on him at the same time. "Hey, kid." Brother Hu stared at him with an unkind tone. "Which side are you standing on? If you want to follow me, stand over here. If you don't want to follow, scram right now." The tall man also looked at Wu Di, his tone softening somewhat. "Brother, there's no need to spoil him. Everyone relies on their own abilities to save their lives. Why hand over our family fortune?" Right at this moment, clear footsteps came from the fork on the right. Everyone turned their heads simultaneously, their muzzles instinctively aiming at the depths of the mist. A figure walked out from the mist, wearing glasses, with a somewhat lean figure, holding an AK in his hand. It was none other than Wenbin. As soon as Wenbin walked out of the passage, he saw the confrontation scene between the two sides, and his heart sank with a thud. His gaze quickly swept across the entire scene, and the next second, his line of sight locked onto Wu Di standing in the middle. Wenbin was silent for 2 seconds, ignoring the guns held by both sides, and walked straight past everyone, coming to a stop beside Wu Di, his tone carrying a bit of helplessness and a bit of pleasant surprise. Big shot. What a coincidence. The scene instantly became dead silent. The flesh on the faces of Brother Hugh and the others froze, and their hands holding the guns paused for half a beat. The tall man's side was also completely dumbfounded, looking blankly at Wu Di, and then looking at Wenbin. Big shot, chapter 390, A Willing Victim Takes the Bait. Wu Di's brow twitched imperceptibly. Seeing Wenbin was rather unexpected, but he immediately nodded faintly. He was no saint, nor was he someone addicted to slaughter. He had never intended to exterminate these ordinary players. Even in limited circumstances, he was still willing to help these people. The scene instantly quieted down. There were 4 people on Brother Hu's side, 4 on the opposite side, plus the 2 people formed by Wu Di and Wenbin suddenly coming together. The situation suddenly became subtle. Brother Hu's eyes rolled around sinisterly a few times. Weighing the number of people and unsure of Wu Di's background, he ultimately did not dare to make a rash move. The tall man and the others on the other side already had intentions to win them over, so they were even less likely to provoke trouble actively at this moment. Both sides remained deadlocked in place. Wu Di had no heart to care about their scheming. His gaze fell directly on Grey Rat behind Brother Hugh, and he raised his chin. "You, come over." He had no other intentions. This player named Rat had a biological perception talent, which happened to be useful for finding Lin Shi and the others, as well as Xiaoya. As soon as these words were spoken, Brother Hugh's expression instantly sank. "What do you mean?" He took a step forward, his muscles tense all over. "My people, you say take them away and they leave. Do you really take me, Brother Hu, for a decoration?" Before his voice faded, he suddenly exerted force with his feet, clenching his fist and smashing it straight at Wu Di's face. A full-strength strike with 48 points of physique carried a whistling wind. If an ordinary player took a hit, the probability of surviving was basically 0. Wu Di stood in place without moving. Only when the fist was right before his eyes did he slightly sidestep, simultaneously clenching his right fist and thrusting it straight out to meet the opponent's offensive. Puff! A muffled piercing sound rang out. Brother Hu's fist froze in mid-air, his eyes wide-rounded in disbelief as he lowered his head to look at his chest. Wu Di's fist solidly pierced through his chest, poking out from his back, with fresh blood dripping down between his fingers. "Shoot!" The remaining 2 lackeys reacted, roaring as they raised their guns and fired. Bang, bang, bang! The gunfire exploded in the narrow passageway, and the bullets hit Wu Di all over. Several holes were instantly shot into his upper garment, the fabric flying, yet not a single drop of blood seeped out. Those standing close saw clearly that the bullet heads crashed into him, as if hitting a steel plate, bouncing right off and falling to the ground with a clatter. Wu Di withdrew his hand, and Brother Hu's body collapsed limply. He raised his eyes to look at the 2 people who had fired. His footsteps did not move, but his figure flickered right in front of the 2 of them. The moment he struck, he vaguely felt his movements pause slightly, as if there was an invisible force pulling. The impact was not large, but it truly existed. The next second, 2 muffled groans rang out. The 2 lackeys collapsed to the ground without even managing to let out a scream, almost at the exact moment they breathed their last. That feeling of sluggishness vanished without a trace. Woody's gaze swept over the corpses on the ground, pondering slightly. Most likely it was someone's talent among these 2 people. Once a person died, the talent effect cut off. A thick smell of blood permeated the passageway. The tall man and the others turned pale, subconsciously taking half a step back, their eyes filled with shock and fear. It was not that they had never seen a dead person, but they had never seen, or even heard of, such a ruthless person who was so neat and clean, withstood bullets barehanded, and pierced a chest with a single punch. Wenbin also frowned and averted his gaze. Although he knew Woody's team's strength was formidable, it was also his first time seeing Woody make a move. The smell of blood rushed straight into his nasal cavity, and physiological discomfort surged upward in waves. Everyone's mind was bubbling with the exact same thought. Exactly how high had this person stacked their physique? Brother Hugh, with 48 points, was like paper in his hands, had it probably not exceeded 100 long ago. Rat had long since collapsed onto the ground at this moment, shaking all over like a winnowing sieve, unable even to stand up. Woody walked over, lowering his gaze to look at him, his tone as calm as if asking about a trivial matter. "Can you still walk?" Rat nodded frantically, his teeth even chattering. I can walk." Wenbin walked over briskly, reached out to pull him up from the ground, and lowered his voice to say, "Guide the way properly, and do not play any tricks. The boss will not kill people indiscriminately. Just do your job honestly." Rat nodded hastily. How could he dare harbor any disloyal intentions? Woody glanced at Wenbin in surprise, did not say anything, and then looked at Rat and said, "Choose a path." Rat immediately closed his eyes to sense for a few seconds, trembling as he pointed his hand toward the right passageway. This side, there are more biological signals. There should be people." Woody did not speak, lifting his foot to lead the way forward. "Boss!" A shout suddenly came from behind. Woody stopped his steps and looked back. The tall man and the others instantly tightened their bodies, neatly taking half a step back, and no one dared to speak again. Woody swept a glance over them. "If you want to follow, keep up." The few people felt as if they had been granted a pardon, collectively exhaling a breath. Exchanging glances, they quickly hurried to follow. The team walked forward in silence like this. No one spoke. In the passageway, there were only footsteps and faint roars in the distance. On the other side, Lin Yu leaned against the sticky rock wall, her chest heaving slightly. When she was just teleported in, she indeed panicked for a moment. There was not a single person around. The mist was so thick that figures could not be seen, and her ears were filled with one strange cry after another. But after panicking for a few seconds, she steadied her mind. Her physique had long exceeded 100, and she also carried a gold-quality submachine gun with her, though ammunition was not much. Yet with this kind of strength, she did not even know what there was to be afraid of. "I wonder where Big Brother Woody and sister are," she muttered softly, her mind still caring most about Xiaoya. Thinking of Xiaoya, Lin Yui immediately grew firm. "I must find her quickly." She even ignored the mucus stuck all over her body. Just like that, Lin Yu walked inward along the passageway, choosing a fork at random whenever she encountered one, and did not stop for a single moment. Until she had walked for close to an hour and a half, encountering another fork. Just as she was preparing to casually choose a path and move forward, a faint groan suddenly came from deep within one of the forks. "Is anyone there? Help." The voice was very weak, as if suffering from some injury. Lin Yu's steps paused, and she instantly became vigilant. The last thing that could be trusted in the apocalypse was a cry for help without reason, but what if they truly were distressed players? Should she help or not? Lin Yu's steps paused. Hesitating for 2 seconds, she still gripped her submachine gun and groped toward the source of the sound. At the corner of the passageway, a man was leaning against the rock wall. The trouser leg of his left leg was stained with a large patch of dark color, and his face was deathly pale. Seeing Lin Yu approach, light instantly welled up in his eyes. "Miss, save me, I was stabbed by someone." He was gasping for breath as he spoke, looking indeed extremely weak. Lin Yu stood a few steps away without getting close, glancing at the wound on his leg. Just as she wanted to speak, footsteps suddenly came from behind her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she abruptly turned her head. 3 men walked out from the fork behind, blocking off the retreat route. There was not a shred of kindness left on their faces. It was full of the smug smiles of a scheme succeeding. Someone really took the bait. Chapter 391, Discovering the Problem. The tall, thin man at the lead scoffed and looked at his companion on the ground. "You acted pretty convincingly." The man on the ground immediately stood up, his legs showing no trace of a severe injury at all, and patted the dust off his trousers. "Of course, this trick works every time." Lin Yu's face darkened as she gripped her submachine gun tightly. "Did you guys set this up on purpose?" "What else?" The tall, thin man gave a lewd smile, raised his hand, and gave a light wave. "Little girl, you sure are pretty. I just wonder if you have any other good stuff on you." The moment his voice fell, Lin Yu suddenly felt her whole body go limp, her limbs feeling as if all their strength had been drained, unable to even lift the hand holding the gun. Her head spun, and her vision darkened in waves. "You." She only had time to spit out a single word before her legs gave out, and she collapsed heavily to the ground. Her whole body was numb, and even moving her fingers took effort, but her consciousness was still clear. "It worked!" A lackey nearby immediately hurried over, kicked Lin Yue's arm to confirm she couldn't move, turned back, and gave the tall, thin man a thumbs up. "Bro, your toxin talent is way too useful. Colorless, odorless, and impossible to guard against." "How else would I make a living with this?" The tall, thin man proudly raised his chin and bent down to pick up the rifle Lin Yue had dropped on the ground. As soon as it was in his hand, he froze. "Holy crap!" He gasped, lifting the rifle up and checking it over several times. "Golden quality. This gun is actually of golden quality. E-18 submachine gun, golden quality." The other 2 also crowded over, their eyes going straight, looking at the long string of firearm descriptions behind it. It really is golden quality. Damn, I've never seen a golden quality firearm in my life. "We've struck it rich, bro. If we take this gun out, who knows how many supplies we can trade for it." The few of them surrounded the gun, their faces filled with uncontainable wild joy, not even sparing a glance at Lin Yu on the ground, their minds completely occupied by this windfall from the heavens. The tall, thin man clutched the Y-18 submachine gun tightly in his hands, glanced at the 3 of them, and scoffed. "Such provincials! You guys don't even think about how many people are still in here. With this golden quality piece of hardware, we pull off a few more jobs, and what can't we get? Follow me and work hard, and there will be plenty of benefits for you later." The 3 of them agreed repeatedly with their mouths, but their eyes quietly met, each harboring their own calculations. They were originally just a temporarily cobbled-together team relying entirely on the tall, thin man's toxin talent. Now that a golden firearm had appeared out of thin air, everyone's thoughts instantly became active. As for this toxin talent, who among them didn't know now that a splash of urine and covering up would solve it? Lin Yu lay on the cold ground with her eyelids drooped, appearing groggy and weak, but her consciousness was crystal clear. The numbness and weakness in her body were fading bit by bit. This colorless, odorless toxin had a fierce momentum when it first took effect, but lacked staying power. At this rate, she would be able to recover her mobility in just a few minutes. She gritted her back teeth and feigned unconsciousness without moving a muscle, daring to plot against her and even snatching her gun. Once she recovered, she would settle this score properly. Did they really take her for a soft persimmon that they could pinch however they wanted? Meanwhile, in the passage on the other side, Wu Di's team also ran into someone. The mist churned as a figure slowly walked out from the fork in the road ahead. It was a female player with a tattered coat and a torn pant leg, but she was exceptionally striking in appearance with an exquisite figure, wearing a look of lingering fear and fragility on her face. Seeing the group of people, she seemed to heave a sigh of relief while also carrying a bit of timidity. "Everyone, could you take me along for a bit? I've been walking alone for nearly an hour, and this place is just too eerie." The eyes of the several casual players in the team went straight, subconsciously looking towards Wu Di at the very front. The woman stood in place, her fingertips tightening slightly as she calculated rapidly in her heart. Her talent was charm, which could only take effect on a single target, and once used, it would bind the target. In the hour or so since entering the maze, she had run into several groups of people, and not a single one didn't harbor intentions towards her. However, their strength was just so-so. Although she paid a small price, she didn't lose out overall, and she even managed to get her hands on a purple-quality weapon. But the team before her was different. The leading man looked taciturn, yet brought so many people along, and his aura was oppressive enough to make people gasp for breath. At a glance, he was clearly formidable in strength. With less than 2 hours left, relying on herself alone, she simply wouldn't last until the dungeon ended. She gritted her teeth, and her talent quietly activated. Wu Di hadn't paid much attention at first, but the moment his gaze swept over the woman, he suddenly felt a buzzing sound in his brain. An inexplicable attraction surged from the other person, her consciousness seeming to be veiled in gauze as all judgment and vigilance rapidly receded, leaving only the woman's bright and stunning face in front of him. His steps moved forward uncontrollably. "Boss?" Wenbin sensed something was wrong and had just cried out. Wu Di had already walked over to the woman in a few steps, reaching out to grab her wrist with a force strong enough to make the woman groan in muffled pain. He didn't speak, dragging the person and turning to walk into a narrow side alley corner nearby, his figure quickly disappearing into the mist. The team instantly exploded into a commotion. This? What is the situation?" The tall guy and the others looked at each other in dismay, and someone had other thoughts. "The boss is acting a bit wrong, huh? Should we go take a look?" "Don't court your own destruction." Wenbin glanced at him, his tone flat. Honestly, waiting obediently is better than anything else. Although Wenbin didn't know what had happened, he certainly didn't believe that a boss surrounded by so many women would be this impatient for lust. The expressions of the few changed, but in the end they still didn't dare to move. Rat shrank to the side, not even daring to breathe loudly. Behind the corner, the woman was pinned against the rock wall, her face full of astonishment. She completely hadn't expected this development. The charm talent should have made the target obedient to her and reduced to a puppet. How come after this person lost control, he went straight for this kind of thing? She wanted to struggle, but in the face of an absolute difference in strength, resistance was like a cup of water trying to put down a cartload of burning firewood. The sound of clothing tearing mixed with heavy breathing was exceptionally clear in the narrow passage. She went from initial astonishment to panic, and later to her whole body turning limp, having to passively endure the torrential rain-like impact. I don't know how long passed before the action stopped. Wu Di stepped back half a step, his consciousness breaking through a layer of mist as it instantly cleared up. He looked down at the woman collapsed on the ground with disheveled clothes, his brows tightly locked. The uncontrollable urge from just now had disappeared, and he was well aware that something had been done to him. But why? Wasn't it because of his physique issue? Yet that split second of loss of control clearly told him that he was normal. He suddenly remembered something, his thoughts sinking into the system panel as he pulled up the details of the life and death together contract. Conclude a soul contract with teammates, using faith as a rope and survival as a vow, and violators shall surely face sanctions. Wu Di paused for a moment, pensive. Chapter 392, arriving just in time. Wu Di straightened his lapels and walked out from the side alley with a calm expression, showing not a single trace of abnormality. The team was dead silent. No one dared to raise their head to look at him, let alone ask what had just happened around the corner. When Ben lowered his eyelids, Mouse shrank his neck, and even the few tall men who had dared to speak up earlier held their breath, making the atmosphere a few shades more oppressive than before. "Move!" Wu Di spat out only a single word and lifted his foot to continue forward, feeling as if they had received a grand amnesty. The crowd hurriedly followed, placing their footsteps very lightly and not even daring to breathe too loudly. Not long after he left, the woman behind the rock wall finally propped herself against the wall and slowly stood up. With disheveled clothes and legs still a bit weak, she gritted her teeth and cursed in a low voice, her face filled with both shame and anger. She had originally wanted to rely on charm to control a powerful backing, but instead she ended up implicating herself. It was a devastating loss. Fortunately, he didn't kill her. Her life was considered saved. "Damn it, if this old lady ever runs into you again, I'll definitely smash your dog head. My chest, it hurts to death." Fuming, she opened her talent panel, wanting to see exactly where something had gone wrong. A line of prompts on the panel was exceptionally piercing. Target's soul strength far exceeds the threshold. The charm effect is distorted and fails. Below it was appended a line of fine print. Passively absorbed 1% of the target's life energy. Physique permanently, +12s. The woman stared at that line of text, stunned for a moment, and then cursed even more fiercely. What a piece of trash talent. I can't even control a single person. Cursing aside, her heart was surging with tempestuous waves, soul strength far exceeding the threshold. Just what kind of strength did that man possess? He could even directly deflect a spirit-type talent. And was this 1% a system error? Are you sure it's not 10%? Damn it. Why does this system still have such garbage issues? No matter what, she would never believe that Wu Di's physique attribute could exceed 1,000 points. The team walked forward for another 20-odd minutes before the passage made a sharp turn. Just as they rounded the bend, everyone saw a figure standing in the middle of the passage. The woman had a tall figure, her black combat uniform stained all over with dark red blood, and her hair tips coagulated with droplets of blood. With her head lowered, her face could not be seen, and 2 corpses lay at her feet. The eyes of several independent members in the team flickered, and filthy thoughts arose in their hearts first. Could the same thing that happened just now happen again? Is she going to be violated and killed again? What a fucking pity this woman's figure is just too good. The few exchanged glances, carrying a tacitly understood obscenity, and subconsciously slowed their pace. The next second, the woman raised her head. Her face was cold, her gaze sharp, and there wasn't a single scratch on her face. She saw Wu Di and nodded slightly. "It's all other people's blood." Commander Chu Ling walked to Wu Di's side, her voice without much fluctuation. "I didn't encounter Xiaoya." The entire scene was dead silent. The tall men and the others opened their mouths, failing to close them for a long time. Holy shit! They were in the same group. This woman is so fierce. All that blood on her body belongs to others? Damn it, what on earth did she do to end up covered in fresh blood all over? It couldn't possibly be tearing them apart with her bare hands. Another pervert? The few of them had only one thought left in their hearts: is this team excessively perverted? Wen Bin, on the other hand, quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Meeting Commander Chu Ling. At the very least, surviving this dungeon shouldn't be much of a problem. Meanwhile, in another part of the maze, Xiaoya was cowering in a corner, her body curled up into a ball. When she was swept in by the white light, she had also been bewildered. With everyone else suddenly gone and sticky walls and roaring sounds all around her, after a brief moment of panic in her heart, she immediately calmed down. Although she didn't know what had happened, in her original world, under such solitary circumstances, she had survived for several years. Big Brother said that the more panicked one is, the easier it is to die. She waited for a long time, discovering that the roaring sounds never stopped, and could only walk slowly outward on tiptoe. Whenever she encountered a fork in the road, she would hug the base of the wall and walk, trying her best not to make a sound. Walking like this for almost an hour, she didn't run into monsters, but encountered people first instead. It was a sharp-mouthed, monkey-cheeked man. Seeing Xiaoya standing alone in the passage, his eyes instantly lit up. "Little girl, all by yourself?" The man licked his lips and slowly closed in. "Come with Uncle. Uncle will take you to find the adults." Having not touched a woman for a long time, she had forgotten why a child could be encountered in this place. Xiaoya felt a shock in her heart. She recognized this kind of gaze. When she used to live in the city, there were also people like this staring at the passing older sisters. She knew what would happen. To protect herself back then, she deliberately made her entire body filthy. It's just that after following Wu Di and the others, she never concealed her appearance again. She didn't speak, turning around and running. Her short little legs scrambled quickly, but after all, she was just a child with limited stamina. After running 2 intersections, she was panting heavily, yet the footsteps behind her were getting closer and closer. "Run! Why aren't you running anymore?" the man sneered, blocking her retreat and reaching out to grab her arm. Xiaoya gritted her teeth, lowering her head to bite down fiercely on the back of his hand. "Hiss! Damn girl!" Feeling the pain, the man flicked his hand and gave her a slap. Xiaoya was slapped to the ground, blood immediately seeping from the corners of her mouth, her left cheek burning with pain. Propping herself up on the ground, wanting to get up, the man kicked her arm again. "You still dare to bite me?" The man squatted down, his gaze vicious and grim. "Be a good girl and listen, or I'll kill you." Xiaoya was in so much pain that tears swirled in her eyes, yet she tightly bit her lips without crying out loud. Her hand groped about her body, touching a short dagger hidden inside her bosom, and she clenched it tightly, hiding it behind her back. This was given to her by Sister Lin Yue when she was learning combat skills with Commander Chu Ling. Just at the moment the man reached out, she abruptly raised her hand, the dagger slashing fiercely toward the man's eyes. "Ah!" The man let out a miserable scream, covering his eyes and retreating half a step. "You're courting death!" Completely enraged, he took out a pistol, intending to vent his anger. Xiaoya closed her eyes with only a single thought in her heart. Are we ultimately going to die after all? "Mom, Dad, I'm coming. Big Brother, sisters, I'm sorry, I haven't repaid you yet." A muffled bang rang out, and she only felt a sharp pain in her chest. Blurry-eyed, Xiaoya opened her eyes and saw a burly bearded man blocking in front of her, smashing his fist right into the man's face. That man flew out like a broken sack, crashing into the rock wall, fainting without even letting out a single groan. The next moment she lost consciousness. Lao Pao shook his hands and looked down at the collapsed little girl on the ground. Half of the little girl's face was swollen. Blood stained the corners of her mouth. Her left arm hung unnaturally. A small patch of her clothes on her chest was soaked through with blood, and her eyes were tightly closed. Lao Pao's brows knitted together tightly. He squatted down to check her breathing, then reached out to press the pulse on the side of her neck. Thankfully, she was still alive. "Isn't this the child from that team last time? How did she end up left here all by herself? Is their team here too? There's no way to save her like this. What should we do now?" Chapter 393, Tough Guy Fighting for His Life. Lao Pao carefully picked up Xiaoya. She felt feather-light in his arms, weighing almost nothing. The little girl's body was as soft as a clump of cotton, her head resting limply in the crook of his arm, and her face was terrifyingly pale. Lao Pao scratched his head aching terribly. Venturing through the maze alone, he was already barely able to look after himself. Now carrying a child, and one so heavily injured at that, how was he supposed to handle this? But he couldn't just leave such a small child here to wait for death. He had a fiery temper and struck ruthlessly, but he still couldn't do something like watch a child throw away her life. Injured like this, having lost so much blood, and unconscious with no one caring for her, she definitely wouldn't last until the dungeon ended. Forget it. He'd take her with him. Lao Pao sighed, stood up, and shielded the little girl in his arms. Hesitating for a moment, he felt even more misgivings in his heart. Later, if I run into her team, seeing her covered in blood and unconscious, won't they directly assume I was the one who shot her? Everyone in that team was no pushover. If they truly misunderstood, he probably wouldn't even get a chance to explain. He looked down at Xiaoya's pale little face, finally sighed again, and walked steadily toward the depths of the passage. I'll just take it one step at a time. He still couldn't get past that hurdle in his heart. Lao Pao had just turned 2 intersections, holding Xiaoya, and hadn't walked far when the system panel suddenly popped up. Ding! The maze-exclusive treasure chest has been acquired by the first player. The treasure chest contains items of gold quality or above. Upon the death of the treasure chest holder, the chest will drop on the spot and can be picked up by other players. Maze map unlocked for all players. Treasure chest location marked in real time. Lao Pao paused in his steps and lowered his head to glance at the simplified map floating on the panel. The golden light dot representing the treasure chest was right in front of his left, not too far away. At his pace, he could reach it in 20-some minutes. Son of a bitch, he cursed under his breath, his brows furrowing into a knot. The system was clearly stirring up trouble. What treasure chest dropping, what gold items, it was simply forcing all players to crowd into one place and kill each other. Subconsciously, he wanted to walk in the opposite direction. If it were just him alone, he might have gone over to take a gamble. Wealth is sought in danger. But now, holding a shot, unconscious little girl in his arms, going over there was purely jumping into a fire pit. Just as he lifted his foot, he paused again. No. Everyone in that team had vicious combat skills. Running into a treasure chest like this, there was no reason they wouldn't come over. To find her teammates walking toward the treasure chest actually had the highest probability. But on the flip side, the people walking that way would definitely be the most numerous, and who knows how many people he might run into halfway. It would be fine if he were alone, but carrying an unconscious child, the slightest mishap meant both of them dying here. Lao Pao stood in place, wrestling with himself for a few seconds, and looked down at the little girl with a pale face in his arms. Blood was still slowly seeping out. If he dragged this out any longer, even if he didn't run into people, she would die from excessive blood loss. Damn it! He gritted his teeth, changed direction, and walked toward the location marked by the treasure chest. Hide if I can. If I really can't avoid it, then I'll just have to face them head on. Walking for less than 10 minutes, footsteps came from the passage ahead. 2 people, one behind the other, stepping lightly, obviously hurrying along while feeling their way with the map. Lao Pao's eyes turned sharp. He quickly retreated to the corner nearby, gently placed Xiaoya on the ground, and flashed to guard the recessed opening himself. Hey, do you think that treasure chest can really drop items above gold quality? Could that be fake? The system even marked a guaranteed gold, and there might even be orange items. Once we get it, we're set to soar. Holy shit, I haven't even seen an orange item yet, and I wonder what stats it'll have. No one is talking about it on the communication channel either. What are you thinking? With good stuff like this, how could anyone possibly blab about it? The 2 of them talked as they rounded the corner, catching sight of Lao Pao standing right in the middle of the passage at a glance. Their footsteps stopped simultaneously. Just one person. The thin man on the left narrowed his eyes, sweeping his gaze over Lao Pao. Brother, are you also heading for the treasure chest? Lao Pao didn't speak, but steadied the rifle in his hands. The short man on the right had sharp eyes. Catching a glimpse of the hem of a garment exposed at the corner, he immediately chuckled. "Yo, isn't the one around the corner injured? Need any help?" The thin man's expression changed instantly. A strong man carrying a wounded person was obviously dead weight. When else, if not now, to squeeze such a soft persimmon? "Brother, leave your supplies and gun behind, and we'll let you go." The thin man raised his gun, pointing the muzzle at Lao Pao. "Otherwise, both you and that patient will have to stay right here." Lao Pao let out a sneer. He knew in his heart that without fighting for it, even if he handed over the supplies, he wouldn't escape. "Just based on the two of you?" Before his voice faded, he suddenly dropped low while drawing his gun and firing simultaneously. Bang, bang! Gunshots exploded in the narrow passage. Lao Pao shot the short man in the shoulder, while a bullet grazed his own left arm, burning with pain. The short man collapsed to the ground screaming, but the thin man reacted quickly, hiding to the side and shooting continuously across the corner, pinning Lao Pao down so he couldn't raise his head. "Motherfucker, you still dare to fight back?" The thin man cursed, changing his magazine. Lao Pao gritted his teeth. Blood from his left arm flowed down his sleeve, but his hand holding the gun remained rock steady. Listening to the footsteps and calculating the enemy's reloading gap, he suddenly rushed out. The thin man had just finished changing his magazine when he looked up and saw a bulky man lunging over. Terrified out of his wits, he raised his hand and shot. Bang! This shot hit Lao Pao squarely in the side of his waist. Lao Pao let out a muffled groan, his steps not stopping. He slammed his entire body forward, pinning the thin man fiercely against the rock wall. Grasping the other's gun with his left hand and twisting it upward, with a crisp snap, the wrist was directly broken. "Ah!" The thin man's scream had just left his mouth when Lao Pao's right-hand gun was already pressed against his chin. Bang! After a muffled sound, the person slid down limply. The short man on the ground was still groaning, holding his shoulder and trying to crawl. Lao Pao walked over, and without any nonsense gave him another shot. The passage instantly grew quiet, leaving only a heavy stench of blood. Lao Pao staggered, leaning against the rock wall and panting heavily. The wound on his waist hurt terribly, blood soaking through his jacket and dripping down his trouser legs. The gunshot wound on his left arm was not light either. His entire arm had gone numb. He looked down at the injuries on his body, then turned his head to look at the unconscious little girl in the recess, cursing coarsely in a low voice. "Damn it, everyone's gone crazy!" He coughed twice, a self-deprecating smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. Wasn't he just a glutton for punishment himself? Originally living carefree all by himself, yet he just had to take on this troublesome matter. "I've got a rough life, a rotten life, but while I can ignore someone dying, I just can't bring myself to do it," he muttered in a low voice, reaching out to wipe the blood and grime off his face. "Little girl, you better hold on. If you really die, I took these 2 shots for nothing." Just as he wanted to crawl over to check on Xiaoya's condition, clear footsteps came from the other end of the passage again. Chapter 394. Narrow Escape. There was more than one person. The footsteps were rapid and heading this way. Lao Pao's heart sank, and he tightened his grip on the gun in his hand, his knuckles turning white from the force. He had just finished a hard fight with 2 road robbers. The blood from the scrape on his left arm hadn't stopped yet, and the piercing wound on his waist hurt agonizingly. If another wave of people came, he was truly afraid he would perish in this ghost place today. He lowered his head to look at the unconscious Xiaoya. Blood had already soaked through her outer jacket, and the little girl's face was as white as a sheet of paper, her breathing so light it was almost imperceptible. Lao Pao twitched the corners of his mouth, his smile bitter and rough. "Little girl, consider yourself unlucky to run into a useless old man like me." His voice was pressed very low, his rough voice wrapped in a hint of self-mockery. "I originally thought about sending you back to your teammates, but now it seems I'm afraid I don't have that chance anymore." I've lived for more than 40 years, braving wind and rain, and rolling around in the apocalypse for so long. I never thought I'd die in such a stifling way at the end, not falling into the hands of monsters, but instead dying at the hands of my own kind. Even he himself felt it was strange. Having reached the gates of hell, he didn't worry about the little family fortune he had hidden, nor did he ponder a way out for the future. What he couldn't let go of in his heart, instead, was this completely unfamiliar little girl. Earlier, when Wen Bin and the others were chatting, they had mentioned that a fierce team was carrying a young girl. At the time he had scoffed, thinking how it could possibly be a child. Now seeing it with his own eyes, he was even more puzzled. This was obviously a child. So how did she come to this survival game? His thoughts didn't drift far before figures walked out from the corridor corner. One after another, a total of 6 people. Lao Pao squinted and looked over, his gaze pausing on the 2 people in the front. Lao Zhou, a Hong. His tense shoulders and back instantly relaxed by half, and the heart that had been hanging in his throat dropped back down. Although they weren't deep friends, they had stayed together in the shelter, and he trusted the character of these 2 people. With them around, at least his life and this little girl's life might be saved. In the opposing team of 6, Lao Zhou and Ah Hong saw Lao Pao leaning against the rock wall, covered in blood. They were also full of astonishment, subconsciously exchanging glances, and saw incredulity in each other's eyes. The 2 of them had also been forcibly dragged into the dungeon by a white light, meeting 4 people successively along the way, and temporarily forming a team. These 4 people were all sharp-minded and calculating loudly. If it weren't for the unclear maze situation and the excessively high risk of walking alone right now, they would have parted ways long ago. Hearing the gunshots overheard just now, Lao Zhou and Ah Hong originally didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but they couldn't stand the other 4 people insisting on coming over to take a look, so they followed along because they couldn't refuse. They never expected to run into Lao Pao here. Lao Pao! Lao Zhou hurried forward, catching sight of the large area of dark bloodstains around his waist and abdomen, and his expression changed abruptly. "How did you get hurt like this?" "Ran into 2 road robbers. Took care of them, and took a hit." Lao Pao said it nonchalantly, tilting his head to gesture behind him. "Don't worry about me first. Check on this child." Ah Hong had already squatted down, carefully lifting the corner of the jacket covering Xiaoya. When she saw the bloodstains soaked through the little girl's chest and her bloodless face, she suddenly raised her head, her tone full of surprise. "Isn't this the child from that team? Why is she with you?" "Picked her up. Ran into some scum who went all out to kill a child." Lao Pao coughed, pulling on his wound and causing sharp pain. "When I got there, she had already taken a shot and passed out." Ah Hong didn't ask any more questions, first reaching out to check Lao Pao's waist wound. As soon as her fingertips pressed down, Lao Pao let out a muffled groan of pain, cold sweat seeping from his temples. A piercing wound didn't hit a vital spot, but he lost too much blood. Ah Hong frowned deeply, quickly pulling out bandages from her personal space, and lowered her head to bandage him up. "I'll give you compression hemostasis first. There's no major issue in the short term, but if it drags on too long." She didn't finish her sentence, but the meaning couldn't be clearer. Lao Zhou and Lao Pao both understood. Without medicine, under these circumstances, a piercing wound combined with continuous blood loss wouldn't hold out for long. After bandaging Lao Pao, Ah Hong turned around again to check Xiaoya's condition. Her fingertips gently rested on the little girl's carotid artery, and she carefully looked at the wound on her chest, her expression growing increasingly heavy. "The situation is even worse than Lao Pao's. The bullet grazed her lung lobe, and the blood loss is too severe. She's young, and her physique can't hold out." Ah Hong lowered her voice. "If she doesn't get proper treatment soon, she won't last an hour." Lao Zhou fell silent. He hadn't expected to run into this child here, let alone that she would be injured so heavily. Not a single other person from that team was in sight, and there was no telling which corner of the maze they were scattered in. Just at this moment, the 4 casual players behind slowly walked over, glanced at the severely wounded person and the unconscious child on the ground, and their expressions instantly dropped. "Lao Zhou, what is the meaning of this?" The bald man at the lead crossed his arms, his tone unfriendly. 2 heavily wounded people, plus a little girl who's about to kick the bucket. You surely don't want to bring them along, do you? Exactly, pure dead weight. The tall and thin guy next to him chimed in. We're heading for treasure chests. Bringing these several burdens along, let alone getting rewards, it's questionable whether we can even survive until the end of the dungeon. Lao Zhou turned around, his gaze sweeping across the 4 people. We know each other. It's impossible to leave them here to fend for themselves. Knowing each other doesn't work either. The bald man sneered. In the apocalypse, it's hard enough to save your own life, let alone care whether others live or die. If you want to bring them, you two bring them yourselves. We certainly won't accompany you. He paused, his gaze scanning unpleasantly over Lao Zhou and Ahong, and added with a fake smile, However, since we've teamed up and walked this road together after all, if we want to separate, that's fine too. Divide half of the supplies in your personal space out. Along this way, we haven't protected you for nothing either. You can't just let us work in vain, right? As soon as these words came out, the expressions of Lao Zhou and Ahong sank simultaneously. As expected, these 4 people had ill intentions all along the way, and now they finally revealed their true colors of taking advantage of a crisis. The 2 of them weren't weak in combat power, but there were a full 4 people on the opposite side, and Lao Pao was still seriously injured. If they really started fighting, the odds of winning were slim. The scene instantly froze. Both sides were at daggers drawn, and the smell of blood in the corridor seemed to become a bit thicker. Right at this critical juncture of a stalemate, footsteps came from the other end of the corridor again. Very brisk, only 1 person, but the footsteps were extremely fast, reaching up close in the blink of an eye. Everyone turned their heads at the same time, looking over vigilantly. A figure walked out from the corner, high ponytail, combat boots, carrying a gun in hand, a trace of a lazy smile still hanging at the corners of her mouth. Shu Kexin. Just as she turned the corner, she cleared up the situation in the scene at a glance. 2 factions confronting each other, people lying on the ground, and a heavy smell of blood floating in the air. She first raised her eyebrows, then let out a chuckle, shaking the gun in her hand. Yo, so lively. Her tone carried a hint of teasing, her gaze slowly sweeping across the crowd. What are you all doing, dividing loot or preparing for a gunfight? As she spoke, her gaze fell on Lao Zhou and Ahong, and she raised a hand to snap her fingers, smiling even more brightly. What a coincidence we meet again. Chapter 395, Bare-Handed Bloodshed. Shu Kexin noticed the familiar figure at the corner, and the smile on her face instantly vanished. Ahong and the other 2 changed expressions, and Lao Zhou quickly explained the cause and effect at a rapid pace. From hearing gunshots and following the sound, to bumping into the heavily injured Lao Pao and the unconscious Xiaoya, and then to these 4 people seizing the opportunity to make trouble and extort supplies. Just as the words fell, Shu Kexin had already squatted down, her fingertips gently touching Xiaoya's cold cheek, and then she lifted the corner of the jacket to take a look at the blood stain soaked through the chest. Her expression instantly turned cold. The lazy smile that usually hung on her face disappeared completely, the corners of her eyes pressed down, and a deep, cold aura of hostility churned in the depths of her eyes. No one knew better than her how filthy human hearts could be in the apocalypse. Before meeting Wu Di, during the days she survived alone, the people who died at her hands were more than those 4 in front of her combined. It was just that after joining the team, with Wu Di holding the front and Lin Shi and the others taking care of everything thoroughly. She was happy to put on a carefree appearance without having to rely on her own life for everything. But this didn't mean that the ruthlessness in her bones had been worn away. Although she had no blood relation to Xiaoya, after spending so much time together, she had long since regarded her as a younger sister. Now she was lying here covered in blood, and even her breathing was so light it was almost gone. "Damn it!" she cursed in a low voice, her fingertips clenched until they turned white. What she usually kept ready in her personal space were weapons and ammunition, while the rest of the supplies were with Lin Shi and Wu Di. At this moment, she actually couldn't pull out anything that could save a life. The four rogue individuals opposite looked at her icy expression and instead laughed even more brazenly. "What's wrong, little sister, acting all cool?" The bald man crossed his arms, his malicious gaze sweeping back and forth over Shu Kexen. "I advise you to be sensible, hand over all the supplies on you, and entertain US brothers for a while. Maybe we can still leave you a way out." "Exactly. Who are you putting on that stinking face for?" The tall and thin guy next to him chuckled lewdly. "So what if you have a gun in your hand? Can you beat the four of us?" Filthy words came one after another, becoming more and more unbearable the more they spoke. Lao Zhou's expression grew even stranger. How did this bunch of people manage to live until now? Are women who can live until now and still live so exquisitely so easy to provoke? Can't walk anymore the moment they see a woman? They were truly fucking stupid to the extreme. At this time, Zhu Kexen slowly stood up. She moved her fingers a bit, and her joints made crisp cracking sounds. "Your mouth is quite dirty." Her voice was very soft, but carried a bone-chilling coldness. "Then there's no need to keep it." Before her voice fell, her entire figure had already rushed out. The speed was as fast as a black shadow. The four of them only felt a blur before their eyes, and the woman who had been standing a few meters away just now instantly reached them. "Shoot! Shoot quickly!" The bald man roared and pulled the trigger. Bang, bang, bang! Gunshots exploded all over the narrow passage, and bullets flew around wildly. But Shu Kexen's movement technique was far too agile, dodging and maneuvering closely against the rock wall and figures. The vast majority of the bullets missed, and only one grazed her left arm, the fabric instantly staining with a patch of dark red. She seemed not to feel the pain, and her pace didn't stop for even a bit. Puff! A punch smashed into the chest of the tall and thin guy in the front, and a muffled sound of bone fracture rang out. The person flew out like a kite with a broken string, heavily crashing against the rock wall, his head tilting to the side as he lost all breath. The remaining three were scared out of their wits, frantically shooting while retreating. Shu Kexen turned her body to dodge the muzzle, closed in closely, and her elbow fiercely slammed into the bald man's throat, with a crisp crack sound. The bald man's eyes widened round. The gun in his hand clattered to the ground, both hands clutching his throat, panting with a rattle, and his body slowly went limp. The remaining two were so scared their legs turned to jelly, turning around and wanting to run. How could Shu Kexen possibly give them a chance? She stepped forward, grabbed one person's collar from behind, and twisted it with the back of her hand, that person's neck crooked at a bizarre angle. The last person had only run 2 steps when he was caught up by her, kicked in the back of the knee, and dropped to the ground with a thud. Don't kill me!" The person cried out in fright, kowtowing repeatedly. "I was wrong. I won't ever dare again." Shu Kexen expressionlessly raised her hand to press down on the top of his head, applying a slight bit of force. Another crisp snap sounded. The passage fell completely silent. The entire process took no more than a dozen seconds. 4 corpses lay sprawling across the ground, each with different manners of death, yet without exception, none of them had any breath left. Blood splattered on the walls, dark red puddles of blood flowed on the ground, and the smell of blood in the air was so thick it made one nauseous. Lao Zhou, Ah Hong, and Lao Pa were all dumbfounded watching this. They had known before that this woman was formidable, but they never expected it to be exaggerated to this extent. 4 armed men, and she resolved all of them bare-handed. How was this just formidable? She was simply a god of carnage. Shu Kexen slowly turned around, the blood on her left arm still dripping down, and her cheeks stained with a few tiny droplets of blood. The hearts of the 3 skipped a beat, their hair instantly standing on end, and they subconsciously shrank back. This woman, she wouldn't want to make a move against them too, right? Shu Kexen didn't pay attention to their reaction, bending down to carefully pick up Xiaoya. "Follow close." She only spat out 2 words, turned around, and walked toward the depths of the passage, the direction precisely being the location marked by the treasure chest. Lao Zhou and Ah Hong exchanged glances, hurriedly supporting Lao Pao from left and right, and closely followed behind. Both of them breathed a huge sigh of relief inwardly. This time it was truly secure. With such a god of carnage present, Lao Pao's life could be considered temporarily saved. Shu Kexen, walking in front, had little expression on her face, but her heart was exceedingly clear. She usually looked carefree and didn't like using her brain, but that didn't mean she was truly stupid. With Wu Di making decisions in the team and Lin Shi scheming, she was happy to have leisure. But when things really happened, she was clearer-headed than anyone else. The maze was so large, searching blindly definitely wouldn't work. The system had just announced the treasure chest location. As long as everyone in the team was still alive, they would definitely rush over there. As long as they found Wu Di, Xiaoya, and Lao Pao would both be saved. How many good things that guy had in his hands, no one in the team knew. As long as they found the person, everything would be easy to handle. The group moved at a flying pace, and having walked for less than 10 minutes, faint footsteps came from the passage ahead. 2 figures walked out from the mist, similarly covered in bloodstains. They were precisely Lin Shi and Su Wanwan. The 2 were holding their guns vigilantly, and when they saw clearly that the opposite side was Shu Kexen, they were stunned at first, and then joy appeared on their faces. But the next second their gazes fell upon the unconscious Xiaoya in Shu Kexen's arms, and the expressions of the 2 instantly changed. "Xiaoya!" Su Wanwan rushed over quickly. How did she get hurt like this? Ran into a piece of trash on the road, making a move against the child. Shu Kexen's pace didn't stop, continuing to walk forward at a rapid speed. It was Lao Pao who risked his life to save her. "Don't talk nonsense. Go find the boss quickly. If it's late, it'll be too late." Lin Shi's gaze swept across Lao Pao, who was being supported behind, seeing the blood-seeping bandage on his waist, and she nodded slightly. "Thank you." Her tone was not heavy, yet it carried a decisive power. "Hold on. Once we find our people, he won't be in danger." Chapter 396, Corpse-Blocked Forked Road. Lao Zhou and the other 2 followed behind, feeling much more at ease. Safety was completely guaranteed, and even Lao Pao's injuries had hope of healing. The only thing they could barely handle was the speed of the 3 women ahead. Shu Kexen walked rapidly holding the child, with Lin Shi and Su Wanwan following on either side, their steps not slowing down in the least, completely ignoring the need to decelerate for the wounded. Lao Pao was already heavily injured to begin with, and by this point he had completely lost consciousness. Being carried along and jolted all the way, the wound on his waist kept oozing blood, and the bandages were almost soaked through. Ah Hong opened her mouth several times, wanting to ask them to slow down a bit, but when she looked up and saw the pale-faced Xiaoya in Shu Kexen's arms, the words died on her lips, and she swallowed them back. The child was already injured to that extent. Slowing down by a fraction meant danger increased by a fraction. She could only grit her teeth, drag Lao Pao together with Lao Zhou, and force herself to keep up. The rock walls on both sides of the passage flew backward rapidly, and the golden light spot representing the treasure chest was getting closer and closer on the map. Ah Hong and Lao Zhou exchanged glances and slowly slowed their pace. Although they didn't harbor any bad intentions, they also knew that this was not the right time for them to show off. The team rushed forward for another stretch, and as they turned the final corner, both Lao Zhou and Ah Hong felt their hearts skip a beat. Right ahead at the treasure chest location marked on the map, a blood-soaked figure was standing there at this moment. Lin Yu had her back to them, holding a submachine gun with the muzzle aimed directly at a corpse on the ground, pulling the trigger stroke by stroke as bullets struck the body and splashed fine sprays of blood. She muttered something under her breath, her shoulders rising and falling slightly, her short hair stuck to her temples by blood, and her whole person exuding a reckless, frenzied vibe. "Xiaoyu?" Lin Shi's voice changed, and she rushed forward quickly. Lin Yue turned her head abruptly, raising her muzzle reflexively. Recognizing that it was them, her tense body instantly relaxed, and she smiled even with blood stained on her face. Sister Kexen? Sister Wanwan, you're here?" Lin Shi rushed in front of her in a few steps, looking her up and down as her fingers trembled. Seeing her face and body caked with dark red blood, her heart clenched tightly all at once. This was her biological younger sister since childhood. Even after entering the doomsday world, she had never seen her suffer such a wretched ordeal. After confirming that most of the blood belonged to others and Lin Yu didn't have any abnormalities on her body, Lin Shi let out a heavy sigh of relief. "How did you end up like this?" "It's nothing, sister. I'm doing great." Lin Yu wiped her face indifferently, smearing the bloodstains on her cheeks even more heavily. She kicked the corpse under her feet, her tone completely nonchalant. "Along the way, people were always targeting me, wanting to rob me of things and setting traps to backstab me. I killed them all, and this is the 28th one." Remembering something suddenly, she pointed at the corpse on the ground and said, "Oh, right. I just killed this fellow and snatched it from his hands. The maze treasure chest is with me now." As she spoke, she grinned with a hint of pride. As soon as her voice fell, she saw Xiaoya being held in Shu Kexen's arms. The smile on Lin Yue's face vanished completely in an instant. "What happened to Xiaoya?" "She's injured. We need to find the boss quickly." Shu Kexen briefly explained the situation. Lin Yue grew anxious too, her gaze sweeping around. Big Brother Wu Di hasn't arrived yet. Her sight swept across Lao Zhou and the other two behind, recognizing them as the ones she had met at the shelter before, and she barely forced the corners of her mouth to twitch in a nod. Just with that single gesture, Lao Zhou and Ah Hong shivered in their hearts. The person who was frantically pumping bullets into a corpse a second ago turned around with a face full of bloodstains and flashed you an eerie smile. A thought popped up in both of their minds simultaneously. Everyone in this group is better looking than the last. Why are they all crazier than each other? Lin Shi had no mind to care what others thought. She swept her eyes around, her brows furrowing slightly. "We'll wait right here." She quickly made up her mind, her tone certain. Big Brother Wu Di is definitely rushing over this way. "Where is Commander Chu Ling?" Su Wanwan asked in a low voice. "Her strength is on par with Sister Zhu, so self-preservation won't be a problem." Lin Shi's fingertips lightly touched Xiaoya's cold face, her voice dropping a few degrees. "The most urgent matter right now is Xiaoya. Her breathing is getting weaker and weaker." Shu Kexen squatted down to carefully place Xiaoya on the ground, then took off her jacket to place underneath her as a cushion. Ah Hong and Lao Zhou exchanged glances, hesitating for a long time before finally stepping forward. "Young ladies, it's not that we want to pour cold water on you. This place is too open. People can come from all directions, and there's not even any cover. With the treasure chest here, players throughout the entire maze will definitely rush here. Guarding it is way too dangerous." "What's so dangerous about it?" Lin Yu walked over to a forked road carrying her gun, the muzzle pointing down, her tone casual. Kill one if one comes. Kill a pair if two come. Once they're all killed off, naturally no one else will come. Shu Kexen raised her eyebrows, giving her a surprised look. She remembered that this young girl wasn't used to fighting and killing, and Wu Di had spent quite a bit of effort to make her see reality. How long had it been since entering this place, and yet her murderous intent had actually become this heavy? Lin Shi didn't say anything, however. She had checked carefully just now. As long as the person was fine, it wasn't a major issue. Ah Hong and Lao Zhou opened their mouths, but ultimately said nothing more, silently retreating to a corner to place the unconscious Lao Pao on the ground. The two of them were feeling extremely anxious and unsettled. They didn't know whether following them was right or wrong. The treasure chest was brightly displayed right here, and players throughout the entire maze were flooding over. It was definitely going to be a massive melee later. Don't let it be that they fail to wait for people, only to lose their own lives here first. Shu Kexen stood up and exchanged a glance with Lin Shi, Su Wanwan, and Lin Yu. The four of them needed no extra words, each choosing a passageway intersection and standing firm. The rules are simple, Shu Kexen said loudly, as if telling everyone, scram or die. The ensuing scene far exceeded the expectations of Lao Zhou and Ah Hong. Almost every 2 minutes, a wave of people rushed in, some fighting solo and others in groups of 3 to 5. The four women guarded 4 directions, speaking very few words, saying just those 2 sentences to whoever they saw. The moment anyone hesitated for even a fraction, bullets would arrive immediately. In a short span of 10-odd minutes, the corpses at the forked road intersection piled up layer upon layer, almost blocking the passage entrance entirely. Roughly calculating, no less than 40-odd people had died at their hands. The stench of blood in the air was thick and choking, and even the mucus on the rock walls seemed to have been stained a dark color. Meanwhile, in a deep, secluded passage not far from the hall, over 30 people were standing at this moment. Everyone held their breath and concentrated, fixing their gazes on a young man with closed eyes right in the middle. The man's face was pale, his temples covered in cold sweat, and his entire body trembled slightly as if he had seen some extremely terrifying scene. A burly, fierce-looking man beside him couldn't hold back anymore and asked in a rough voice, "How is it? What did you see? What on earth is the situation ahead?" The young man opened his eyes abruptly, panting heavily with his eyes full of lingering fear. "They're dead. They're all dead. Not a single one of the people we charged over there survived." Chapter 397, Courting Death. More than 30 people were crammed into the narrow corridor, and it instantly exploded with commotion. "Bullshit, no matter how ruthless they are. Can they kill so many of us?" The burly, fierce-looking man spat, his eyes filled with suppressed greed. "That's a dungeon-exclusive treasure chest. It's guaranteed to be of at least golden quality. And who knows, we might even loot an orange item." "Orange? Have you ever seen one? You won't find another chance like this if you miss it." Hearing the burly man's words, someone immediately chimed in, clamoring to rush over and get a piece of the pie. But quite a few people turned pale and instinctively shrank back. "Don't just think about the benefits. You all know what kind of talent Shaolin has," someone discussed in a lowered voice. "Just smell it yourselves. The stench of blood has drifted all the way here, and the gunfire over there hasn't stopped for a second. Who the hell knows what kind of ruthless characters are guarding the place? Exactly, is it worth risking our lives for a treasure chest? Besides, even if we actually manage to snatch it, how are so many people supposed to split it? Who gets more and who gets less? In the end, we'll just end up killing each other." The argument grew fiercer, and people's hearts scattered even faster than expected. Taking advantage of the chaos, someone quietly shifted backward and, while no one was paying attention, turned and slipped into the fork in the road behind them. Where there was a first, there was a second. More and more people slipped away like a receding tide, and in a short while, the group shrank by nearly half. The young man called Shaolin squeezed his way to the very back of the crowd, taking advantage of the chaos. His precognition talent could only be used once a day, and each time it could only glimpse 3 minutes of future imagery. In those brief 3 minutes just now, he clearly saw more than 30 people rush over, only to be mowed down in droves like wheat by 4 women, leaving a river of blood and not a single survivor. Although the opponents were also injured, none of their wounds were fatal. This was simply not an opponent of the same order of magnitude. He certainly didn't want to die here. He had an intuition that once his talent level went up, he would be able to go further than anyone else. Taking advantage of the burly man's engrossed shouting at the front, Shaolin lowered his head, silently slipped into the side path, and vanished without a trace. By the time the burly man came to his senses, only 12 people were left on the spot. Damn it, a bunch of cowards. The burly man cursed in anger, looked at the remaining people, gritted his teeth, and continued to agitate them. Those who left are spineless cowards, which just means fewer people to split the loot. Once we get the treasure chest, the good items will be auctioned on the spot. Highest bidder wins. Perfectly fair. Suddenly, someone in the crowd scoffed. If an orange item is really unboxed, who can afford it? Who has that many resources? In the end, won't it just belong to whoever has the bigger fists? The burly man's expression sank as he stared fixedly at the person who spoke, his teeth aching from clenching them so hard. The morale that had been raised with such difficulty was mostly ruined by this guy again. If manpower weren't truly insufficient right now, he would have taken this guy out on the spot. Right at this moment, clear footsteps came from the other end of the corridor. "Quiet!" The burly man abruptly raised his hand to signal everyone to shut up, his expression changing slightly. "Someone is coming. Stay alert." Everyone held their breath, tightened their grips on their weapons, and looked in the direction from which the footsteps were coming. The mist churned, and 2 figures walked out. The man walking in front had a tall and upright figure, impeccably clean without even a speck of blood stain, his brows and eyes cold and stern, looking straight ahead. The woman following slightly behind and to his side was the exact opposite. Her clothes were almost soaked in blood. Blood droplets dripped from the tips of her hair, and her gaze was grim. The spotless man and the woman covered in blood made for an indescribably eerie pairing. The moment the treasure chest's location appeared, Wu Dai knew there was no need to keep leading a group of people to search slowly anymore. Wenbin was also tactful and took the initiative to propose walking separately. He knew very well in his heart that with this big shot around, the treasure chest had nothing to do with anyone else. Going there would just be courting death. Why bother wading into this muddy water? What if he got accidentally injured? Wudi didn't object either and let him leave. Wudi didn't even glance at these 12 people, his steps unceasing as he walked briskly straight toward the corridor where the treasure chest was located. Commander Chu Ling followed closely behind, her pace extremely fast, almost jogging to barely keep up with his speed. He had others on his mind and didn't want to delay for even a second. "Wait. Brother, heading for the treasure chest too? Quite a lot of people died over there, and just the 2 of you going over is pure suicide. Why not team up with us? There's strength in numbers, and we can split whatever benefits we get." Seeing Wu Di heading straight for the treasure chest's location, the burly man subconsciously wanted to recruit them. Wu Di's steps didn't stop, and Commander Chu Ling followed behind, without even giving them a look. The 2 of them rushed past as if no one else was around, their figures quickly disappearing around the corner. "Damn it, giving you face, and you don't want it." The burly man turned red with anger, but after cursing he suddenly smiled again. "Just right. Let these 2 fools go ahead and scout the path first." He waved his hand at the people behind him, lowering his voice. "Let's see if they can tie down the people inside. If they really are experts, they can consume a lot of the enemy's ammunition. If they're noobs, it's no great loss if they die." All 12 people remained silent, pricking up their ears to listen to the movement around the corner. After just a few minutes, the original gunfire actually gradually stopped. The corridor suddenly became frighteningly quiet. The burly man's eyes lit up. Holy shit, these two guys actually have some skills. Did they really tie down the people inside? Definitely. Otherwise the gunfire wouldn't have stopped. They might have already started fighting. Someone must be injured. Everyone chattered eagerly, excitement showing on all their faces. Opportunity knocks. The burly man waved his hand, greed flashing in his eyes. While they both suffer, we'll rush over and pick up the scraps. The treasure chest will be ours. Someone chuckled with a vulgar tone. That woman just now is quite a looker, both beautiful and fierce. Once we catch her later, we'll have to let the brothers have a good time. Laughter broke out, and the 12 people raised their guns, emboldening themselves as they rushed toward the corner. Just as they rounded the corner, the oncoming stench of blood almost made them gag. Dense corpses were piled up on both sides of the corridor, layer upon layer, almost completely blocking the road. Their states of death varied, with most covered all over in bullet holes. Quite a few people felt a sinking sensation in their hearts and instantly wanted to back out. But the arrow was on the bowstring and had to be fired. The 12 people gritted their teeth and forced themselves to rush inward anyway. Greeting them was the suddenly erupting dense gunfire. Lin Shi and the others didn't give any warnings or call out. These 12 people didn't even clearly see human figures before bullets swept over like a rainstorm. The few people charging at the very front fell down on the spot without even letting out a scream. Hiding behind a corpse, the burly man raised his eyes in horror to look over. At the end of his vision, in the open space deep inside the corridor, that man, whom they had regarded as a path-scouting stone just moments ago, was half-crouched on the ground, carefully supporting a little girl's back and feeding her something into her mouth. The burly man's pupils abruptly constricted. How could there be a child? How could there be a little child? Just as this thought popped up, a bullet pierced through the corpse he was hiding behind and precisely drilled into his forehead. The burly man's eyes were still wide open, but his body fell down, forever frozen in this final confusion. Chapter 398, May's Mutation. Wu Di squatted down beside Xiaoya, his fingertips probing her carotid artery, her pulse so faint it was almost imperceptible. He fell silent for 2 seconds, looking at the items in his personal space, and then took out the Gene Reconstitution Original Fluid, Chapter 78, which was an item obtained from an event treasure chest previously, acquired after being strengthened by his talent. He had originally kept it, intending to wait for the player community to develop so he could trade it for resources suitable for himself. However, the gap between his development speed and the player community's was simply too huge, leaving him with no chance to use it, yet he never expected it would come in handy here. Looking at Xiaoya's feeble state, he hesitated no longer. He pried open Xiaoya's mouth and slowly poured the original fluid down. The light blue liquid slid down her throat, and almost immediately, a hint of extremely faint rosy color appeared on Xiaoya's pale lips. The sporadic gunfire and screams outside did not affect him in the slightest. Wu Di stood up, his gaze falling on Lao Pao, who was lying against the wall not far away. The man was covered in blood, the bandages on his waist had long been soaked through, and his breathing was intermittent, seemingly unable to hold on much longer. There were not many ripples in his heart. This man was injured like this just to save Xiaoya. The person who saved her could not die here. Lao Zhou and Ah Hong were guarding beside Lao Pao. Suddenly catching sight of Wu Di looking over, the hearts of both skipped a beat simultaneously. Clearly the other party was expressionless, with no fluctuations even in his eyes, yet that intangible sense of oppression made it hard for people to breathe. Sweat broke out on Lao Zhou's palms, and his mind couldn't help running wild. Could he be thinking of making a move against us? The next second, a purple parabola flew toward them. Lao Zhou instinctively reached out and caught it. It was a deep purple potion, slightly cool to the touch. The next moment, the system panel popped up. Body-tempering spiritual liquid, purple quality, permanently increases physique, +20 after consumption. Effective only for the first consumption. Chapter 312. Lao Zhou's mind went blank with the buzz, almost failing to hold the potion steady. Purple quality, permanently adds 20 points of physique. Such a precious item, and he just casually tossed it over. For a split second, a crazy thought uncontrollably popped up. How about embezzling it? If this thing is used on oneself, strength will directly leap up a flight of stairs. But the thought had just emerged when he shook his head fiercely, suppressing that bit of greed. If he really dared to embezzle it, he would probably end up just like the other players on the ground the very next moment. Feed it to him. Wu Di's voice came over flatly, without much emotion. Lao Zhou hurriedly acknowledged, not daring to delay, and quickly pried open Lao Pao's mouth, pouring the entire potion down. Within a few minutes, Lao Pao let out a muffled groan and slowly opened his eyes. First, he looked around in a daze, then suddenly sat up, lowering his head to look at his waist. The originally piercing wound had long healed, leaving only a shallow red mark, and even the pain had completely vanished. He clenched his fist, his whole body filled with endless strength, and an unprecedented sense of power surged within his muscles. This! Lao Pao widened his eyes, his face full of disbelief. My injuries are all healed? I feel like my strength is more than double what it used to be. It was the purple quality potion given by that person, which permanently adds 20 points of physique. Lao Zhou hurriedly lowered his voice, reached out to hold back Lao Pao, who wanted to stand up and express his gratitude, and motioned with his chin toward Wu Di's direction. Don't go over yet. Take a look at the surroundings. Only then did Lao Pao notice the scene in the corridor. Corpses were piled layer upon layer at the intersection. Blood flowed all over the ground, and the bloody smell in the air was so thick it could not be dispelled. 4 women were holding guns guarding various spots, their faces expressionless. He drew a sharp breath, swallowed back the gratitude that had reached his lips, and obediently stood against the wall, not daring to make a sound again. Good heavens, how long has it been, and they actually killed so many people? Can the treasure chest be opened? Wu Di turned his head to look at Lin Shi. Lin Shi took the treasure chest from Lin Yu's hands, pressed her fingertips on the lid of the box for a few seconds, and then shook her head. No, the system prompts. The dungeon has not entered the final stage. The treasure chest cannot be opened temporarily. Wu Di nodded slightly and said no more. His gaze swept across the corpses all over the floor, his brow slightly furrowed. This dungeon is very strange. From entering until now, apart from the faint roars in the distance, not even half a proper shadow creature had appeared. All the dangers and all the deaths came entirely from the mutual slaughter among players. If it was just to make players fight among themselves, what was the meaning of setting up mazes and setting up treasure chests? Pure survival of the fittest, screening out the strong. He always felt it wasn't that simple. Time passed minute by minute, and the corridor was surprisingly quiet. No players dared to rush in rashly anymore. There were only 30 minutes left until the 3-hour dungeon ended. Just at this moment, the ground beneath their feet suddenly vibrated slightly. Wu Di's eyes narrowed. Immediately afterward, the vibration became more and more obvious. The reddish-brown rock walls on both sides began to crawl slowly, and the mucus on the surface churned and bubbled like living biological tissue. The ground also became hot and undulating, as if something was arching out from underneath. What's going on? Is there an earthquake? Lin Yui steadied her body and looked around vigilantly. No one answered her. Everyone watched with their own eyes as the towering rock walls sank into the ground little by little, like melting wax. The narrow corridor continuously widened and extended. Adjacent partitions dissolved one after another, and the field of vision became wider and wider. In just a few dozen seconds, The winding and twisting maze completely disappeared. Replacing it was an incomparably huge circular plaza. The grayish-brown ground was flat and hard. The edges of the plaza were hidden in the dimness, and countless players were scattered around in various places, their faces filled with bewilderment and shock. A rough glance showed that the remaining people added up to less than 100. What's the situation? How come the maze is gone? What trick is the system playing? Didn't it say we can go out after surviving for 3 hours? Why are there so few people? Did everyone else die? Exclamations and curses rose one after another, and the entire plaza fell into chaos. Soon, someone's gaze locked onto Wu Di and his group in the center of the plaza, as well as the location of the maze treasure chest marked on the map. The treasure chest! The maze treasure chest is there. It's in the hands of that group in the middle. It must be in the hands of one of them. The crowd instantly became restless, and many people subconsciously moved forward a few steps, the greed in their eyes unable to be concealed at all. But before they could make a move, the gray mist shrouding the sky above the plaza suddenly retreated rapidly, as if drawn away by an invisible hand. The moment the mist dissipated, dense black shadows poured out from the peripheral areas around the plaza. Hoarse and sharp roars suddenly exploded. They were all the shadow creatures from outside the shelter last night, surging from all directions like a tide, densely packed to the point where no boundary could be seen. The players who had been restless just moments ago instantly froze, their complexions turning pale in a flash. So many monsters. Chapter 399, Headshot with a Single Bullet. Wu Di immediately bent down and picked up Xiaoya. The little girl's breathing was steady, her brows were relaxed, and her overall state clearly indicated she was fine. Wu Di had experience and knew that completely digesting such a huge physique enhancement would still take some time. "Boss, what should we do?" Shu Kexen approached with her gun raised, her expression grave. Monsters were everywhere, and their numbers were enough to make one's scalp tingle. "Hold your positions." Wu Di stood right in the center, holding Xiaoya, his tone calm. "Monsters take priority, don't panic." Lin Shi and the other three immediately scattered to form a defense circle, and old Zhou's trio also quickly raised their guns, closely watching the incoming tide of monsters. The gunshots instantly merged into one, with the monsters in the front row falling in batches and their corpses disappearing directly, but the ones behind were endless, continuing to charge forward. Other players in the square were also forced to open fire, fighting each other independently, with screams rising one after another. Amidst the chaos, a few dark figures took advantage of the monster's cover to quietly sneak around to the side, their muzzles secretly aiming at Wu Di in the center of the square. The treasure chest was right there, and this man should also be one of them. Kill this man first and let them fall into chaos before talking. Bang! A gunshot rang out abruptly. The bullet headed straight for Wu Di's back. It was as if Wu Di had eyes on the back of his head. Without even turning his head, he raised his right hand backward, his index and middle fingers precisely closing together. With the crisp clink, the bullet tip was steadily clamped between his two fingers, the metal casing slightly burning at his fingertips. He casually flicked it. The bullet returned along the original path at an even faster speed, precisely penetrating the forehead of the player who fired. The smile on that person's face had not yet disappeared, and their body had already fallen straight down. Many players around saw this scene, falling into a dead silence for half a second, catching bullets with bare hands, and able to counterkill. What kind of strength was this? Was this fucking still a human? Could it be some special talent? Holding Xiaoya, Wu Di slowly turned around, his gaze sweeping across the restless crowd around him. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried penetrative power, clearly reaching into everyone's ears. "If you want to survive, focus your minds on the monsters. Whoever dares to pull any more little tricks, I wouldn't mind cleaning up the internal issues first." The monster tide kept surging up in waves, and the roar shook the ground slightly. The players in the square went from initial panic and scattering to gradually being forced to gather in the middle, forming a loose defense line back to back. Whether it was because this batch of survivors wasn't weak in strength, or because the monsters intentionally controlled their offensive, the most violent first wave of impact was actually abruptly blocked. It was just that there were also quite a few slick operators hiding within the defense line. Someone cowered in the inner circle, gripping a kitchen knife or steel pipe in hand, making pretentious gestures. Others hid behind others, pointing their muzzles at the sky, shouting slogans without pulling the trigger, entirely counting on the people in front to risk their lives. Amidst the messy gunshots, various discussions couldn't be suppressed and popped out. Catching bullets with bare hands. What kind of talent is that anyway? It's too outrageous. Fucking pretentious. What does he think he is? Still cleaning up internal issues, brothers. How about we screw them over? Never mind whether he's being pretentious or not. The treasure chest's location is right inside that group of people now. We can't let them swallow it all by themselves, right? Hey, look. Those few women look really hot. Their figures are all stunning, but they're covered in blood, which looks creepy. What's wrong with blood? How long has it been since we've seen a woman in this ghost place, let alone covered in blood? Even fighting in a bloody battle is better than nothing. Shut up, everyone. Can we finish clearing the monsters first before talking? Thinking about the treasure chest now, do you feel like you aren't dying fast enough? All kinds of voices mixed together. Greed, lust, luck, and reason. At this moment, a figure suddenly leaped out from the crowd. The man was in his 30s with a scar on his face. Raising his hand, he pulled 3 or 4 grenades out of his personal space, pulled the pins, and threw them uniformly into the monster group. With a few loud explosions, a dozen or so monsters in the front row were blown to pieces. "Everyone quiet down!" the man roared, his voice covering most of the roars. He raised his hand, pointing in the direction of Lin Shi and the others, full of confidence. "I am the 96th on the vehicle leaderboard, Hao Zhenyan. This treasure chest is shared by the entire dungeon. You can't let your single team hog it all. I guarantee with my reputation on the leaderboard, hand the treasure chest over to me for safekeeping. And after dealing with the monsters, it will be publicly auctioned on the spot. Highest bidder wins, and no one can think of playing any tricks." He paused, his tone carrying a bit of arrogance. "And I can guarantee that as long as the treasure chest is with me, I will cover the safety of your team." As soon as these words came out, quite a few echoed voices immediately sounded in the crowd. "Holy shit, I just checked the leaderboard and it really is named Hao Zhenyan." "Right, the big shot is right. We can't let them hog it. We can rest easy leaving it to Monkey Brother. He's a ranked figure. Would he cheat us out of this little stuff? Hurry up and hand over the treasure chest. What time is it? And you still want to hog it? Have you no shame? There are so many of us helping you resist the monsters. Hurry up." Looking at the surging public sentiment, Hao Zhenyan couldn't hide the smile at the corners of his mouth. The reputation of the 96th rank on the leaderboard was always useful every time it was brought out. Once he got the treasure chest, he would secretly pocket a few good things inside, then casually take some defective products to cope with the auction, completely unknowingly. Just as he wanted to speak again to apply pressure. Bang! A deafening gunshot suddenly exploded, crisper than a grenade explosion. Before the smile on Hao Zhenyan's face had time to retract, his entire head exploded with a bang like a rotten watermelon. Red and white matter splashed everywhere, and several nearby players were covered head to face in it, freezing in place for a long time without reacting. 2 people who had never seen such a bloody scene felt their stomachs churning, bent over and vomited on the spot. A portion of the people looked over following the source of the gunshot. Shu Kexen was holding a shotgun, standing at the outermost edge of the defense circle, with the muzzle still emitting a faint white smoke. She was drenched in blood, with dark brown blood scabs congealed on her clothes, expressionless and with cold eyes. She completely ignored the surrounding shocked gazes, raised her hand, and gave another incoming monster a shot, blasting the monster directly backwards. Who else wants the treasure chest? Her face was gloomy, her voice wasn't loud, but it clearly smashed into everyone's ears. As long as you dare to speak up, this lady doesn't mind rewarding you with a shot of shotgun shells, sending you to keep this fellow company. The people who were just clamoring to divide the treasure chest all shut their mouths, instinctively shrinking their necks back, not wanting to be noticed. Motherfucker, why is this so-called leaderboard big shot so trashy? Afterwards, they observed around, trying to see if there were any teammates with ideas. Just dying a person or two. How many people have died in here by this time? Although that woman was a bit savage, with so many people in here coming one shot each, they could drown her with spit alone. Chapter 400, Insatiable Greed. Inside the hall, all the players were entirely focused on holding back the rushing tide of monsters. On the surface, no one dared to shout loudly anymore. Yet how could the greed hidden within the crowd be suppressed so easily? Whispers in twos and threes mingled with the roars of the monsters, drifting over with the wind, every sentence agitating human hearts. What is there to be afraid of? There are dozens of us, and only a few of them. If we really swarm them, we can crush them to death just by sheer numbers. Exactly. The stronger a talent is, the more usage restrictions it has. Catching bullets bare-handed just now might have been their ultimate trump card, but how many times can they use it? They're probably already exhausted by now. If we weren't up front blocking the monsters, could they be holding onto the treasure chests so securely? Right, the monster tide is so fierce. The few of them would have been torn to pieces long ago. We've also put in the effort and bled, so why should all the treasure chests go to them? I think they're just paper tigers. If they truly incur the public wrath, they won't come out ahead either. They definitely know each other. Everyone don't believe them. With so many people here, they're just putting on a bluff. If you ask me, everyone should go together and grab the treasure chests first. There are guaranteed gold-tier good things inside. Take a gamble, and a bicycle can turn into a motorcycle. Someone was fanning the flames hiding behind the crowd, and others followed with low echoes. Their voices weren't loud, yet every word drilled straight into people's hearts, accompanied by the miserable screams of quite a few players being torn apart by monsters. Many people were already suppressing their greed. Stirred up by these words, their eyes became active again. Staring at Wu Dai and the others, their fingers involuntarily tightened around their triggers. In such a chaotic situation right now, perhaps taking a gamble wasn't entirely out of the question. It's just death after all. Perhaps they themselves would be the one who survived. Wu Dai stood in place, holding the sleeping Xiaoya in his arms, hearing every single one of these words fall into his ears. He hadn't originally intended to exterminate them all. Players who could survive until now all had some degree of capability. As long as they honestly resisted the monsters and went their separate ways after the dungeon ended, he couldn't be bothered to argue. After all, no matter how one person collected supplies, it couldn't compare to how fast a group of people could do it. The residential module last time was a prime example. But looking at it now, human greed is insatiable. Relying solely on deterrence cannot suppress it. If this group of people were really incited to turn on them, catching them in a pincer attack from front and back, even if he could withdraw unscathed, Lin Shi and the others would inevitably be distracted, and Xiaoya would also easily be affected. Heaven knows if there would be any other twists and turns later in the dungeon, and he didn't want to capsize in a gutter. With a thought in his mind, Wu Di looked at an item in his personal space. Automatic defense turret. Exclusive item. Can be set at a fixed position in the shelter. Comes with 10,000 rounds of universal ammunition. Automatically locks onto shadow creatures to launch attacks, lasting until ammunition is exhausted. Duration, 12 hours. This was an item unboxed from the shelter's exclusive supply crate, and he didn't know if it could be used here. Wu Di had a thought, and chose to use it. In the next moment, a floor plan popped up on the system panel. A trace of solemnity flashed through Wudi's heart. Is this also a shelter? His fingertips tapped on the system's pop-up floor distribution map, selecting the open space 10 meters to his side. The next second, a faint light flashed on the ground, and a silver-gray rotary turret materialized out of thin air. The barrel was as thick as an adult's arm, with 6 barrels arranged in a ring, and the heavy base firmly rooted in the ground. The turret only occupied an area of about 1 square meter, completely not looking like it possessed 10,000 rounds of bullets. Hum! The turret automatically completed its calibration, and the 6-barreled rotor spun rapidly. Da-da-da-da-dee! Dense bullets poured toward the left monster tide like a metallic rainstorm, their firing speed so fast they connected into a long line. The nearby monsters were instantly riddled with holes like a sieve, and the originally surging offensive was directly suppressed by a large margin. This sudden change startled the surrounding players, and many subconsciously dodged backward, fearing being affected by stray bullets. FK, what is this thing? It's an item, an automatic turret. I saw someone unbox this thing in the communication channel. This firepower is way too fierce. One of them matches the output of dozens of us. Holy shit with this thing. What monster can't be held off? What are you thinking? This fucking thing is a one-time use item, damn, used right here. This thing won't attack us, right? No, I remember it was said in the communication channel that this thing only locks onto monsters. How do you know it won't attack? Have you seen the attributes? As soon as these words came out, the surroundings instantly quieted down a bit, and many people's faces showed a look of dread. Wudi had no leisure time to listen to their discussions. Come over here. Lin Shi, Shu Kexen, and the others immediately gathered their defensive line, retreating to the side rear of the turret to form a circle. Shu Kexen turned back and waved at Lao Zhou and the others. You guys come over too. Lao Zhou, Ahong, and Lao Pao quickly ran over, and Wen Bin also somehow followed behind the 3 of them. The few of them crowded into the defensive circle, looking at the rapidly spinning turret beside them, feeling much more at ease in their hearts. Wu Di carefully handed Xiaoya into Lin Shi's arms, and casually took out a uniquely styled black assault rifle from his personal space. W1 standard assault rifle, purple. This was captured from the hands of the natives in the previous world, and he had never used it. He raised his hand, aimed the muzzle at the back of the crowd, and directly pulled the trigger. Bang! A man in the crowd whose mouth was open, fanning the flames, instantly had an extra bloody hole between his eyebrows. His latter half-sentence stuck in his throat, and he fell straight down. Before everyone could react, gunshots rang out one after another. Bang, bang, bang! Every shot was incomparably precise, killing with every single shot. The few people who had been hiding in the crowd stirring up the most trouble didn't even have a chance to dodge, getting blooming foreheads one by one and collapsing to the ground. There were 8 more corpses on the ground that still retained some warmth. Wu Di's muzzle lowered slightly, his gaze sweeping across the entire scene, his tone calm. Who else wants to try? Continue. The automatic turret was still outputting crazily, and a large open space had already been cleared of monsters on the left. Many sharp-eyed players had long since hidden behind the turret's range, taking a breather with the help of the firepower. Yet at this moment no one dared to celebrate. Everyone's gaze fell upon the gun in Wu Di's hand, their hearts pounding wildly. Some people still refused to believe it, sticking their necks out from the crowd and poking their heads out. You dare to kill all of us? When the monsters come, who? Bang! The voice came to an abrupt halt. That person had an extra bloody hole in his forehead, his eyes still wide open, full of disbelief. By what right do the treasure chests belong to your team Pre? Bang! Another person fell down. Everyone don't be afraid, his bullets are bound to run. Bang! Before the third person could finish speaking, he collapsed to the ground. 3 shots, 3 people, all headshots with a single shot, without even a fraction of deviation. The entire scene fell into complete dead silence. Fortunately, at this moment, the impact of the monster horde was completely suppressed by the automatic turret. The remaining less than 40 players all had pale faces, looking in terror at the man standing beside the turret, holding their breaths subconsciously. No one spoke anymore. No one wanted to be the one sticking their neck out.